If you like the story, you can support the author on Patreon. Link is in the description.
Chapter 61, Strange Scene. Third person's POV. Ha 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 ha. You made him apologize. Man, I wish I had been there to see it. Yami laughed boisterously, banging on the table with tears in his eyes, his cigarette nearly slipping from his mouth. Oh, but you can't. Steven smirked, casting his image of icon spell to create a projection of the scene. Yami watched with interest as the scene unfolded. Humph, I'm never going to let him live that down, Yami huffed, blowing out a puff of smoke while smiling broadly. Anyway, good job, you guys. You earned us a bunch of stars for your deeds. We'll be out of the negative in no time. Yami said, looking at everyone proudly with his chest held high. Yami then turned to Wanda and asked, So, what do you think of your very first mission as a magic knight? Wanda rubbed the back of her head. Intense is the only word I can come up with. That's right, this was your first mission, wasn't it? Talk about a crazy first mission, Steven muttered, looking a bit surprised. Noelle smiled at Wanda. I think you did very well for your first mission. You definitely did better than I did. Wanda felt a bit bashful at the compliment but smiled. It was thanks to the training Steven had me do the week before. Just then, the door was flung open, revealing Magna and Luck. Yo! Hey, guys! Looks like you made it back from making your report before we did with our mission, Magna said as they joined the others. What were you guys even doing? Steven asked, raising an eyebrow. Magna wiped his knuckles on his chest and blew on them. Oh, nothing much, just took down a bunch of bandits and earned a gold star. The usual. Compared to what we went through, it really was nothing, Noelle scoffed, resting her head on her hand with a bored expression. What did you guys do then? Luck asked with interest. It was Asta's turn to act smug, copying Magna's arrogance. Oh, nothing much. Just saved the capital from a terrorist attack and got promoted to third-class junior magic knight. What? Magna exclaimed in surprise before tilting his head in confusion. What's a third-class junior magic knight? No clue, Luck shrugged. You two seriously don't know? Even after all this time? Yami asked, looking confused before going on to explain the ranking system. It's the Magic Knight ranking system. Starting from 5th class up to 1st class, there are Junior Magic Knights, Intermediate Magic Knights, and Senior Magic Knights. Once you reach the 1st class, it moves up to Grand Magic Knight, and finally, the Wizard King. By the way, you guys haven't changed ranks since you joined. You're both still 5th class Junior Magic Knights. So, you'd better start treating Asta as your superior, Yami said with a teasing look at Magna and Luck. Say what? Both Magna and Luck exclaimed. Oh, and Charmy's been raised to 1st class Junior Magic Knight. Bow down to my superiority. Charmy cackled madly, but then she heard a cough and turned to see Steven giving her a look, causing her to freeze. Not you, Senior Steven. Your superiority knows no bounds and is far greater than mine. Charmy declared, frantically waving her hands in a bow. What? That pipsqueak is my superior? And why is she calling Steven a senior? Magna shouted, pointing at Steven. Because Steven is obviously a rank above her. Get with the program already, Yami scoffed. He was promoted to 5th class Intermediate Magic Knight. Steven stuck his tongue out and flashed 2 peace signs. Bullshit! Magna yelled, pointing at Steven. I've been a Magic Knight way longer than you. How did you surpass me by an entire ranking section? By being better, obviously, Steven said, tilting his head as if it was the most obvious answer. Magna collapsed on all fours. The world is an unfair place. Yami glanced at Asta, noticing he had a faraway look. What's on your mind, kid? Asta gave a wary smile. I can't stop thinking about Captain Fuegoleon. Yami scoffed with a serious expression. Don't worry about that hot-blooded hardass. Knowing him, he'll wake up earlier than planned and come back even stronger. Asta chuckled. You're right. So if he's going to come back even stronger, then so will I. He did declare me as his rival, after all. I wouldn't want him to leap ahead. No, Yami said, looking serious. Ever since you became a Magic Knight, all you've done is train and go on missions. You need rest to clear your head. It's not just your body that needs rest, your mind needs it too. Yami then turned to Steven. That goes for you too. I know you like to lock yourself in your room and study, but your mind also needs a break. So, tomorrow, I'm giving you guys an official day off. Captain's orders. Stephen sighed. Guess I can't complain if they're captain's orders. Just then, Finral's portal appeared beside them. What's this? You guys have vacation days? Then I know how we're going to spend tomorrow. We're going to a mixer. Finral said, stepping out of the portal. A mixer? Noelle inwardly exclaimed, looking at Stephen worriedly. Can't. Sorry, Stephen said, shaking his head. Finral was taken aback. What? Why? I was especially hoping you would come, Stephen. Hey? Why would you? Stephen asked, tilting his head in confusion. You're a good-looking guy. The chicks would dig you, which would attract even prettier girls, Finral exclaimed, stars in his eyes. I am? Stephen asked, tilting his head in confusion. Hearing his confusion, everyone blinked as they stared at him. What? Vanessa, watching from a distance, covered her mouth to suppress her laughter. Oh my god, he's oblivious to his own looks. That just makes him even cuter for some reason. Stephen shook his head. Sorry, no matter how much you try to get on my good side, I must decline. I have a fiancée. It would be disrespectful to her if I went. Why am I relieved and saddened at the same time? Noelle wondered to herself. Finral's eye twitched at Stephen's, thinking he was only trying to get on his good side, and he sighed, shaking his head. I forgot you were engaged. I guess I'll take Luck as your replacement. I feel like I should feel insulted for some reason, Luck said, narrowing his eyes before shrugging. So, what are you going to do tomorrow on your day off? Finral asked curiously. Stephen rubbed his chin as he pondered the question. I suppose I'll take Mimosa on a date. What? Noelle exclaimed. They all turned to look at her with a weird expression. Noelle turned bright red and waved her arms around. I was just surprised, that's all. Ha ha ha. She laughed nervously. I mean, come on, you're taking my cousin out on a date. I wasn't expecting that. I was curious why you would do that. Because she's his fiancée, obviously, Asta said, shaking his head as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Noelle only glared at Asta, gritting her teeth. Stephen shrugged. It's mostly to get to know her better. We agreed to give this whole fiancé thing a try. I see, Noelle muttered, turning her head with a distant look. Finral looked up at the ceiling with tears gathering in his eyes. Stephen, I hate you. You good-looking bastard. At the end of the day, as Stephen was heading to his room after a bath, he found Noelle standing by his door, leaning against the wall and staring down at her feet with a pensive expression. What are you doing here? Stephen asked, raising an eyebrow. Do you need something? Noelle scratched the side of her head awkwardly. I wanted to thank you. But I feel like that's all I've been doing lately. I sound like a broken record, she muttered. Thank me for what? Noelle glanced down and briefly smiled to herself. He doesn't even see what he did as something that needs gratitude. For standing up for me against my brother. It's something I never had the courage to do myself. And getting the Wizard King to make him apologize? I never thought I'd hear an apology from him in a million years. So, not wanting to sound like a broken record again, thanks. She chuckled softly. Stephen placed a gentle hand on her head and patted it. You don't need to thank me for that. They were being jerks. You don't deserve to be spoken to like that, no one does. Noelle looked down to hide her trembling lips and teary eyes. She felt the warmth of Stephen's hand on her head and closed her eyes to savor the moment, when she would usually have pushed his hand away. Right, sorry, your hair, Stephen teased, remembering the other times she had swatted his hand. With a faint smile, she shook her head and walked past him. Don't worry about it. That's all I wanted to say. Oh, and I hope you enjoy your date with Mimosa tomorrow, she said as she walked away. Thank you. Stephen replied, looking after her with a puzzled expression before stepping into his room. Tears welled up in Noelle's eyes as she muttered, why did I have to say that? And why do I feel like crying? What is wrong with me? She wiped her eyes and sniffled as she continued walking. Unbeknownst to her, Wanda stood at the corner, holding a pillow and blanket. She had seen Noelle's teary exit and sighed quietly. I feel like I just witnessed something I shouldn't have. Wanda muttered to herself. End of Volume 2. A/N what a high note to end this off on, don't you guys agree? And so as it's the end of the volume, you guys know what this means. Your favorite moment of the volume time. Yay! We had many good moments this volume, like battling Mars in the mirror dimension, rescuing Wanda, meeting Sidorak, Steven and Secret getting together, secretly meeting Mimosa in her room and having their talk, which for some reason was my favorite moment. Comment below which was your favorite moment. I sound like a fucking YouTube channel. Chapter 62, Strange Date, 1. Third person's POV. As Mimosa sat at her vanity brushing her hair, the rhythmic strokes through her golden tresses before she paused abruptly. A familiar face emerged in the mirror's reflection, hovering just above her shoulder. Steven, with his dark curls slightly tousled and a crooked grin. He raised a hand in an awkward wave, his eyes twinkling with amusement. Mimosa let out a soft giggle, covering her mouth with delicate fingers. I don't think I'll ever get used to you appearing like that, she admitted, her cheeks flushing a gentle pink. Steven's smile deepened, a dimple appearing on his left cheek. I did warn you, he teased, the warmth in his voice unmistakable. True, Mimosa said, setting down her brush and turning to face him in the mirror. Her eyes shone with anticipation. That's why I'm here, waiting. Are you going to come in? Steven's expression softened, but he shook his head. Not tonight, unfortunately. A flicker of disappointment passed over Mimosa's features. Oh. She murmured, her voice trailing off. But there's a reason, Steven said quickly, a spark of excitement lighting up his eyes. Captain Yami is insisting we all take a day off tomorrow. A grin spread across Mimosa's face. Captain Van Jans has the same idea. He says we need to rest and recharge. He's giving us the whole day off too. Perfect. Steven's tone shifted to one tinged with nervousness. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing away for a moment. So. I was wondering if you'd like to spend the day together? Just us. Mimosa's eyes widened in surprise, her heartbeat quickening. Really? She stood up so fast that her chair scraped against the floor. I would love that. Realizing her sudden enthusiasm, she bit her lip, cheeks blazing as she slowly sat back down and cleared her throat. I mean. Sure. That sounds nice. Steven's shoulders shook with barely suppressed laughter as he watched her, a hand covering his mouth. Mimosa's blush deepened, and she glanced down, twiddling her fingers to hide her embarrassment. So, where are we going? She asked, trying to regain her composure and shift his attention. He smiled, eyes warm with mischief. I thought we could explore the capital. I've never really taken the time to see it. Mimosa's face brightened with an excited smile. Then leave it to me. I'll be your guide, she declared confidently. Steven chuckled, a sparkle of joy in his eyes. It's a date then, he said, giving her a playful wink. As he began to fade from the mirror, his voice lingered. I'll pick you up early tomorrow. When his presence dissipated, Mimosa pressed both hands to her cheeks, feeling their warmth. He called it a date, she whispered, a giddy smile stretching across her face. She leaped onto her bed, hugging a pillow as she rolled back and forth, squealing quietly. I'm so excited. What am I going to wear? She sat up suddenly, eyes wide with panic as she imagined every possibility. The next morning, Steven stood before a full-length mirror, turning this way and that. Steven looked at what he was wearing apprehensively, his brow furrowing. Is this too much? Perched on the windowsill, Nero watched him with unblinking eyes. The bird offered no response, just a judgmental stare. You're right, Steven muttered, shoulders slumping. This is way too tacky. He snapped his fingers, causing a subtle shift in his attire as it adjusted to look more relaxed. He smoothed the lapels of a tailored blue three-piece suit and checked the cloak of levitation folded neatly in his breast pocket. He sighed, I've never done this before, Nero. Can you tell? Nero rolled her eyes and fluttered over to perch on his shoulder. Steven inhaled deeply, nodding to himself. Okay. This is it. As he exited his quarters and passed through the bustling common area, where he went to inform the others of his departure. Yami smirked at him from across the room. Enjoy yourself, Gramps. Don't go breaking a hip, Yami teased, arms crossed and eyes twinkling with mischief. Steven shot him a glare, but a smile tugged at his lips. I hate you, he muttered playfully before conjuring a portal. Just as he stepped through, Nero took off, landing on Noel's head, choosing to stay behind to give Stephen some space. Wanda, who had been nearby, leaned toward Noelle with a mischievous grin. Feel like tagging along to see what those two are up to. Noelle blinked, taken aback. Why? Isn't that intrusive? And how would we even catch up? He can teleport anywhere. Wanda's grin only grew. I have my ways. And he told me last night he was taking her to the capital. Besides, it could be fun, she coaxed, winking. Before Noelle could voice her doubts, a familiar voice boomed across the hall. Look! Asta! The ladies are waiting. Finral called, his tone full of excitement. Wanda nudged Noelle, eyes gleaming. See? We have a ride. What do you say? Noelle hesitated, biting her lip. Then, with a reluctant sigh, she nodded. I guess I'm in. Perfect! Wanda exclaimed, pumping her fist in victory. Mimosa sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing the fabric of her long green dress patterned with delicate flowers. A brown belt cinched her waist, adding a touch of elegance. She took a deep breath, the anticipation making her fingers fidget. The sound of glass being tapped caught her attention, face appearing once more. She shuffled over towards the mirror, and saw Stephen there once more. So, shall I just jump through the mirror? She asked a bit nervously. Stephen raised an eyebrow. If that's what you want to do, then sure. Her heart skipped at the teasing lilt in his voice. Without another thought, Mimosa darted forward, diving into the shimmering mirror. The surface rippled as she passed through, emerging in the mirror dimension. The disorienting sensation made her squeeze her eyes shut, arms flailing for balance as she began to fall. Stephen caught her deftly, holding her close as he steadied her. Easy there, he chuckled, his eyes searching hers with gentle amusement. Mimosa felt the heat rise in her cheeks as she looked up at him. Sorry, I might have overdone it. Don't worry about it, Stephen said, his smile soft as he kept his arms around her for a moment longer. They stood there, gazing at each other, the bustling world on the other side of the portal waiting. You look beautiful, Stephen said, breaking the silence, his voice low and sincere. Mimosa's eyes flickered down as she muttered, Thank you. You look very handsome too. Her gaze lifted, trailing over the suit that fit him perfectly. Stephen's grin turned playful. Shall we? He held out his hand, rough yet gentle, waiting. Mimosa's fingers slipped into his, dainty and trembling, as they stepped forward. The capital awaited them, bustling and alive under the bright morning sun. A ripple in space opened as Stephen and Mimosa stepped into the heart of the capital, hands still intertwined. The city sprawled out before them, a tapestry of stone streets, towering spires, and the bustling hum of people. I know I said I was the one going to be the one taking on the date, but it seems you are going to be the one taking charge here and showing me around. Stephen teased. Mimosa simply puffed her chest and marched ahead, taking the lead while still holding his hand like I said leave it to me. I'll show you a good time. Will you now? Stephen said teasingly. Mimosa froze as she turned towards Stephen with a bright red face and panicked expression. I didn't mean it like that. PHTTT ha ha ha. Stephen turned his head and began laughing seeing her expression. It's not funny, Mimosa pouted her slightly as she puffed her cheek. I don't want you think that's what I meant. Sure, I believe you, Stephen said, chuckling and shaking his head. Yeah, well your tone suggests otherwise, Mimosa muttered, pursing her lips. No, I seriously believe you. Now come on, Mimosa, show me the good times you promise. You mean it? She exclaimed, her face turning red with embarrassment, which only caused Stephen to laugh some more. From a shadowy alley nearby, Wanda and Noelle peeked out, with Nero perched on Noelle's head like a tiny sentinel. Wanda's eyes gleamed as she whispered, they look like they're having fun. Are you sure they only met recently? Noelle's eyes followed the pair, her heart twisting in an unplaceable way. Yeah. They really do, she said softly. Wanda's expression faltered for a moment as doubt crept in. Am I doing the right thing? She pushed the thought aside and grinned. Come on, before we lose them. Chapter 63, Strange Date, 2, unedited. Third person's POV. Stephen and Mimosa were walking through the capital hand in hand. As they were passing through different buildings, Stephen saw Mimosa eye a cafe before looking away. Are you interested? Stephen asked with a raised eyebrow. Mimosa asked, looking at Stephen in confusion. I saw you looking at that store just now, so I was curious if you wanted to go. Stephen asked. It's not a store, it's a cafe actually, it could wait. Mimosa shaking her head. What are you talking about? It could wait? If you're interested, let's go inside. Stephen scoffed as he took her towards it. But are you sure? I was supposed to be giving you a tour. Mimosa said, tilting her head in confusion. You are giving me a tour, plus this is a date, the point of this is to spend time together. It doesn't matter where we do it now, does it? Stephen smiled confidently as he led her inside. Mimosa's cheeks turned slightly pink. I suppose you do have a point, she muttered, subconsciously tightening her grip around his hand as she felt butterflies in her stomach. As they went inside, a waitress smiled politely at them and guided them to an available seat by a window. As Mimosa sat down, she picked the menu in front of her and began kicking her feet with an excited look. Cute, Stephen thought, seeing her excitement. As he looked at the menu, he saw different types of cakes and pastries with different kinds of drinks. I take it you like these kinds of things? Stephen wondered. Mimosa was a bit embarrassed to be seen that way as she nodded. I have a bit of a sweet tooth and this place has one of the best. So what do you recommend? Stephen asked curiously as he continued to examine the menu. Now that's a good question, Mimosa muttered. I always can't seem to make up my mind when it comes to these things. Since the macarons are great, but so is the chocolate shortcake. Why don't we order 2 different things and share it between ourselves? Stephen suggested, noticing how much of a hard time she was having picking out an order. Would that be all right? I don't mind, Stephen shrugged with a nonchalant expression. All right then, we'll do just that, Mimosa smiled. Oh, and you should try these with the black tea, it would complement the sweetness perfectly. She then backpedaled a bit, waving her hands in front of her. Not that you have to, it's only a suggestion. Don't worry, seeing as you suggested it, I'll give it a try, Stephen said, reassuring her that it was all right. When the waitress came back, they gave their order and waited. Outside the cafe, Noelle and Wanda were seen observing them from a distance. Noelle had her hands over her eyes. I can't make out what they're doing or saying. Well, to me it seems like they're having a great time. Mimosa is laughing while Stephen is talking animatedly with his hands, Wanda said, reporting to Noelle what she was seeing. What? Noelle asked, looking up towards her, only to see Wanda with binoculars over her eyes. Where did you get binoculars? Noelle exclaimed, taken aback. I borrowed them from Gordon, he was happy to lend them to me, Wanda smiled as she continued observing. Why would Gordon have binoculars? Noelle asked in confusion. He likes bird watching, Wanda chuckled. Give me that, I want to see what they're doing as well, Noelle said as she snatched the binoculars from Wanda. When Noelle looked towards them, she saw the waitress appear, handing them their order and then thanking her. Her eyes widened as she saw Stephen grab a macaron and feed it to Mimosa, who was blushing and still went and took it. Noelle let out a low grumble in annoyance. It was Wanda's turn to be curious, so she snatched the binoculars from Noelle. She looked through the binoculars and saw a bright red mimosa pick up a macaron, stretching out her hand, shyly feeding it to Stephen, who was laughing at her embarrassment. However, she also saw Mimosa began to chuckle. Whoa, those two don't play, Wanda muttered. Noelle stood back up, still annoyed, as she muttered, that's it, I'm leaving. Wanda looked towards Noelle as she was walking away and asked, aren't you curious if they would kiss towards the end of the date? Noelle froze mid-step before turning around and stomping towards Wanda, snatching the binoculars she was holding out for Noelle to grab with a smirk. She was back on her spot, grumbling, I'm only on the lookout to make sure he doesn't take advantage of Mimosa. She can be a bit ditzy sometimes. Wanda said with a straight expression. As Stephen and Mimosa finished with their meal, Stephen noticed Mimosa still had a bit of chocolate by the corner of her lips. Here, you still got a bit of chocolate left, he said as he reached out and wiped it with his thumb. He then casually licked it off his thumb. Mimosa stood frozen, steam rising from her head. You could have just told me, Mimosa stuttered, unable to look him in the eyes as she looked down. You would have wiped it off with a napkin and it would have been a waste of such good chocolate, Stephen said, tilting his head in confusion. Noelle had a bright red expression as she witnessed the scene. That playboy. Playboy? Isn't that his fiancée? I mean, look at how smooth he did it. He must have done this a million times already with a million different women, Noelle screeched. Wanda looked towards Noelle teasingly, would you want to be one of those million women? Wah. No. Absolutely not. Noelle stuttered, turning bright red. Can you be any more obvious? Both Wanda and Nero thought simultaneously. As Stephen and Mimosa exited, Mimosa was giggling behind her hand while Stephen had a bright red expression. Why would you think it was proper etiquette to drink tea with your pink out? Mimosa asked between her giggling. It's just what I've seen and heard. I can't believe I was lied to, Stephen muttered as his ears were turning redder. Mimosa only chuckled to chuckle. She reached out for his hand, interlocked their fingers together and leaned on his arm. I thought it was cute, she teased, looking at his embarrassed expression with a beaming smile. I'm just glad I found out now before I would have completely embarrassed myself, Stephen sighed, shaking his head. Both Stephen and Mimosa continued with their tour of the capital with their 3 spectators following behind them. Chapter 64, Strange Date, End. Third person's POV. As Stephen and Mimosa walked through the capital, the sky began to darken and the sun dipped below the horizon. Yeah, I have an older brother too. He's a magic knight as well and is in the Coral Peacock Squadron, Mimosa sighed apprehensively. Do you not like him or something? Stephen asked, raising an eyebrow at her tone. I mean, don't get me wrong. He's my brother, so of course I care for him deeply, but he has a way of always getting on my last nerve, Mimosa said, pouting slightly. Stephen chuckled. I see, so it's like any other siblings. I suppose you're right, Mimosa said, rubbing the back of her head. Seeing that it was getting late, Stephen asked, want to get dinner together before calling it a day? Mimosa, slightly disappointed that their date was ending, nodded in agreement. It's a shame we have to call it a day, she muttered. Stephen noticed her disappointment and gave her a reassuring squeeze. Hey, just because this date is ending doesn't mean there won't be others. This is only our first one. Mimosa smiled as she leaned against his arm. You're right, it's just that I didn't expect to have such a good time together. It's one of those moments you wish could go on forever. Stephen, trying to lighten her mood, gave her a teasing look. You didn't expect to have a good time. No, wait. I didn't mean it like that, Mimosa exclaimed, giving him a panicked look before realizing he was teasing her. She huffed and pouted. You know exactly what I meant. Wanda looked bored and tired as she leaned against a wall, her hands in her scarlet leather jacket. Nero, who also seemed done with spying, sat on her head. Noelle, still leaning over the wall, peered through her binoculars. Can we go home? I'm bored, my feet hurt, and I'm hungry. I miss Charmy's cooking, Wanda sighed in exasperation. In a minute. They just went into a fancy-looking restaurant and ordered something. This might be their last stop before they call it a day, and we might see if they really kiss, Noelle said, waving her off. Wanda rolled her eyes. I'm regretting this more and more. You know when their date ends, Stephen will teleport away and leave us behind, right? Hey! Noelle turned to Wanda in surprise. That's what I've been trying to tell you, Wanda said with a deadpan expression. Finral probably already left, and we can't ask Stephen for a ride, or he'll know we've been following him. Noelle sighed. Then I'll just order us a carriage to take us back to the base. If you say so, what are they doing now? Wanda asked curiously. Let's see, Noelle said, peering through the binoculars. Their food just arrived. It looks like Stephen ordered some type of steak, and Mimosa got some pasta or something. Uh-oh. Wanda turned to Noelle, confused. Uh-oh? What do you mean by uh-oh? Noelle looked at Wanda nervously. Stephen looks flushed and is swaying side to side. Whatever he ate must have had some alcohol or wine in it. So? Wanda tilted her head, puzzled, while Nero's eyes widened in surprise. Noelle face-palmed. I forgot, you weren't around for Stephen's first fiasco. His alcohol tolerance is abysmal, and he turns into a different person when he drinks. It can't be that bad, can it? I'm sure I tasted wine in some of Charmy's cooking. After the first incident, Charmy started making his food non-alcoholic. We need to go now. We have to save him from embarrassing himself or doing something to Mimosa, Noelle said as she dashed ahead. A few minutes earlier, Stephen and Mimosa sat at a fancy table, talking and laughing as they shared childhood stories. A waiter approached, presenting Stephen with a platter of sliced steak adorned with red sauce and Mimosa with a plate of pasta. Stephen casually ran a piece of steak through the sauce and took a bite. When Mimosa glanced up from her plate, she noticed Stephen swaying slightly, his cheeks flushed as he giggled after hiccuping. Stephen? Mimosa asked, concerned. Are you all right? He all right? I'm fantastic, beautiful, Stephen giggled. Hey! Mimosa responded, taken aback. Her concern grew when Stephen suddenly started to cry mid-bite. I feel like the luckiest man in the world. I'm on a date with a beautiful woman, eating steak. It doesn't get better than this, does it? Are you by any chance drunk? Mimosa asked, disbelief in her tone. Pfft, he me? Drunk? He, you're so funny, Mimosa. 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 Wow, even your name is beautiful, Stephen said dreamily. Mimosa's face turned beet red as Stephen took her hand in his, more tears streaming down his face. Mimosa, I promise to make you the happiest woman in the world. Steam practically rose from Mimosa's head as embarrassment took over, especially when she noticed the odd looks they were receiving. Luckily, Noelle and Wanda arrived just in time, rushing toward them. Noelle? What's going on with Stephen? Mimosa asked, her face still flushed. Noelle. Wanda. Stephen called out, throwing his arms up in excitement. Stephen giggled, covering his mouth with his hand like a mischievous child. He leaned toward Mimosa and whispered, he Mimosa, don't tell them, but they've been following us this whole time. It was so cute watching them try to hide. They must be worried about you. You have really good friends. Mimosa stared at Noelle and Wanda, who turned red with embarrassment. Let's get him out of here before he says anything else, Noelle grumbled, motioning for Wanda to help. Together, they grabbed Stephen's arms and began dragging him out. Stephen cheered as he was pulled along. All three of them were bright red as they exited the restaurant. Wait a minute! Stephen exclaimed, breaking free from their grip. He wobbled over to a waiter. Here, good sir, this should cover our bill and a tip for your service, Stephen said, placing a pouch of coins on the empty platter. He leaned in and whispered into his ear, buy yourself something pretty, hee. Stephen! Noelle screeched as they hurriedly pulled him away from the confused and weirded-out waiter. Outside the restaurant, Mimosa turned to Noelle and Wanda, concern in her eyes. Now, can you please explain why Stephen is acting like this? Stephen can't handle alcohol. If he drinks any, he ends up like this, Noelle replied, clearly annoyed. Stephen waddled over to Mimosa, arms outstretched, tears in his eyes. Mimosa, can I have a hug, please? Mimosa, looking flustered, let Stephen hug her. Her arms were stretched awkwardly as she glanced at Noelle and Wanda in confusion. She patted his back hesitantly, and Stephen sighed contentedly. Ah, this is nice. Mimosa's lips curled into a faint smile before turning to Noelle and Wanda. So how do we fix him? You don't, Noelle said, turning away with a sigh. He needs to sleep it off, and he'll be back to normal tomorrow. When Noelle turned back, she saw Mimosa's blissful, smug expression as she continued to hug Stephen, eyes closed and ignoring Noelle's words. A tick mark appeared on Noelle's forehead as she yanked Stephen away, breaking their embrace. As Stephen was dragged off, his hand stretched out shakily. Mimosa, no. Mimosa mirrored his outstretched arms, a disappointed look on her face. Why are you disappointed? Noelle demanded, noticing her expression. But he's kinda cute like this, Mimosa pouted. He looks so weak and defenseless. I just want to protect him. They turned to see Stephen sitting on the ground, sniffling with puppy dog eyes, arms out. My Mimosa. Cute, Mimosa muttered, covering her mouth with her fist as she melted at the sight. With a serious expression, Mimosa said, the Golden Dawn base is nearby. Let him stay there to rest, and he'll be returned tomorrow. Like hell he will. Wanda and Noelle retorted in unison. Mimosa clicked her tongue and turned away with an annoyed look. Did you just click your tongue? Noelle asked, deadpan. No, Mimosa replied with a straight face. Chapter 65, Strange Aftermath. Third person's POV. Stephen woke up groggily the next day, a confused expression plastered on his face. He sat up quickly, glancing around the room with wide eyes. Relief washed over him when he realized he was safely in his own bed, but he rubbed his temples as panic started to build. Oh no, he muttered, his voice tinged with dread. Why can't I remember anything after the restaurant? What did I do this time? He groaned, anxiety bubbling up as he buried himself under the blanket. I don't want to get up. If this hangover is any indication, it means I got drunk. I'm not ready to face the consequences of my actions. Nero, who had been perched quietly nearby, hopped over and tried to lift the blanket with her beak. Stephen yanked it back down, sparking a brief tug-of-war between the two. Just leave me here to die alone. Stephen cried dramatically. Nero chirped insistently, pulling at the blanket again. What do you mean, handle it like a man? I am handling it like a man by avoiding the problem and hoping it goes away. It doesn't get any more manly than that, Stephen scoffed. Irritated, Nero began pecking him furiously. Ow, ow, ow. Stephen yelped, grabbing her midair and bringing her close. No pecking. Bad bird. Nero stared back at him with a deadpan expression. Stephen sighed, rubbing his eyes. All right, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much did I embarrass myself? And be honest. Nero pecked him 8 times, one sharp tap after another. An 8. Stephen screeched before collapsing back with a whimper. I'm so doomed. With a resigned groan, he noticed Nero's unwavering gaze. All right, all right. I'm getting up, he mumbled, pushing himself out of bed. He took a long, hot bath, hoping it would ease his throbbing headache, and dressed in his usual attire. Stealthily, he made his way to the common room where everyone was gathered for breakfast. Peeking around the corner, he saw the group chatting as if nothing unusual had happened. He breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe Nero was exaggerating. Yes, that has to be it. Hey, Gramps! Awake from your nap! Yami called out, spotting Stephen lurking like a guilty child. Stephen winced and stepped into the room, rubbing his head. Morning, everyone. If it isn't Party Steve. Vanessa teased, a mischievous grin on her face. Stephen winced again, this time visibly. Please don't call me that, he groaned, dropping into a chair and laying his head on the table. Just tell me the damage. Noelle and Wanda were the ones who brought you home, so they know what happened at the start, Vanessa said, still clearly amused. Stephen raised an eyebrow. Why do I feel a flashback coming on? He muttered. When you got back, you practically kicked the door down, Vanessa said, unable to suppress her grin. Flashback. Bam! The door burst open, startling everyone. Wanda and Noelle stood on either side of Stephen, holding him up as he swayed unsteadily. What is up, party people? Stephen bellowed, pulling free and throwing up rock and roll hand signs. Luck, Magna and Vanessa sprang up, raising their arms and cheering, Party Steve. Yami burst into laughter, his eyes crinkling with amusement. Ha ha ha. No way. Did this idiot get drunk during his date? Hey. 2 things, bucko. Stephen slurred, pointing at Yami. 1, I'm not drunk, just free. And 2, it wasn't during the middle of the date. It was at the end. He stumbled over to the table and, without warning, began to sob. I miss mimosa. Vanessa's smirk widened. You know what you need? Another drink to drown your sorrows. I'll get one for you. She chirped, skipping away. Is it just me, or is it getting hot in here? Wait, 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 Stephen interrupted, waving his hands. You saw how wasted I was, and your solution was to get me more drunk. Vanessa shrugged, giving him a thumbs up. Yup. You were already drunk, so what did it matter? Honestly, fair enough, Stephen admitted, rubbing his forehead. Let me guess, I stripped, didn't I? Around the table, everyone nodded, grinning. Stephen turned to Asta with a serious expression. Asta, promise me something. Sure. Asta replied, caught off guard. The next time you see me like that, I want you to take your sword and knock me out cold. I don't want to wake up until the next day. Asta's eyes widened. Are you serious? I mean it, Stephen said solemnly. Promise me. Asta scratched his cheek before nodding. I'll do it. Wanda frowned. Isn't that a bit extreme? Stephen met her gaze with unwavering seriousness. Nothing is too extreme if it means saving my dignity. Mimosa walked down the grand hall of the Golden Dawn base, the quiet echo of her footsteps interrupted by the sudden sound of wings flapping. She turned around, puzzled, and saw an origami bird flying toward her. A small smile appeared as she extended her hand, letting the delicate paper creature land softly on her palm. The origami bird unfolded itself, revealing a note. Hey, it's Stephen. Well, I guess that's obvious. Can we talk? I want to apologize for what happened last night. As Mimosa finished reading, the note ignited and vanished without a trace, leaving no ashes behind. Her smile brightened, and she skipped down the hall to her room, ignoring the curious glances from her fellow mages. She stood in front of her mirror and gently tapped it, watching as the glass rippled like water. Moments later, as Stephen was about to step forward, only to be taken by surprise as Mimosa stepped through the portal instead. Stephen's awkward demeanor was apparent, and he could barely meet her eyes. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, Mimosa lifted a finger, silencing him with a gentle smile. Wait. You don't need to apologize for anything. He shifted uncomfortably. I still feel like I do, though. Mimosa shook her head, her eyes warm. I had a great time last night, and that's not something you should feel sorry for. It was nice to see a different side of you. Her voice took on a teasing lilt. Stephen groaned, his ears turning bright red. Ugh, please forget ever seeing that. It's too embarrassing. Nope, she said with a playful pop, her cheeks tinged pink. Like I said, it was cute. He cleared his throat, desperately wanting to change the subject. Well, that wasn't how I pictured our date ending. I wanted to make it memorable. It was memorable, Mimosa teased. Please, spare me, Stephen pleaded, but her soft laughter made him smile despite himself. Reaching into his pocket, Stephen produced a small golden necklace with a 4-leaf clover pendant. Since I couldn't make the end of the date memorable enough for you, I made this for you to remember the date by. Stephen bashfully rubbed the back of his head as he explained, it's enchanted with my strongest protection spell to keep you safe, and I chose a 4-leaf clover because we spent most of the evening exploring the Clover Kingdom. Mimosa's eyes widened with surprise, the gesture taking her aback. She wasn't one for jewelry, but the thoughtfulness behind the gift left her speechless. You made this yourself? She asked, her voice touched. He rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, I know it's not much, and I know you're not materialistic, but it's what came to mind. Before he could say anything else, she wrapped her arms around him in a deep hug. Looking up at him, her smile was so radiant it left Stephen momentarily speechless. Thank you. It doesn't matter what it is, I'm just glad you were thinking of me. It means more than you know. Turning around, she lifted her hair and glanced over her shoulder, her cheeks flushed. Would you do the honors? She asked, exposing the back of her neck. Stephen felt his own face warm as he nodded. Of course. He carefully placed the necklace around her neck, letting the clover pendant rest against her chest as he fastened the clasp. There, he whispered, and Mimosa released her hair, turning around. They found themselves mere inches apart, frozen as their eyes met in an intimate silence. The moment felt charged, almost as if their mind were becoming one. They both moved at the same time, but a bit too eagerly, causing them to bonk their foreheads together, making both of them wince and crouched down holding their foreheads. And rubbed their heads before glancing at each other and bursting into light laughter. Shall we try that again? Stephen asked, his voice soft as their laughter faded. Mimosa nodded, her smile shy but inviting. Stephen cupped her face gently as he leaned in again. This time, their lips met in a tender kiss, and Mimosa melted into the warmth of the moment, savoring every second. As they parted, their faces lingered close, the magnetic pull drawing them into one more kiss, longer and deeper, neither wanting it to end. Chapter 66, Strange Thoughts of Mimosa. Third person's POV. Mimosa and Stephen slowly pulled away from their kiss, Mimosa's eyes slightly unfocused as she basked in the after effects of the moment. Whoa, Mimosa muttered as they separated. She glanced at Stephen shyly, holding her cheeks to stop herself from blushing. Every time I'm with you, I end up blushing, how embarrassing. Stephen chuckled and smiled at her endearing reaction. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you. Mimosa looked down, pressing her fingers together nervously. Can we do it again? It felt really nice. I would be more than happy to, Stephen said, gently lifting her chin so she could meet his gaze, before drawing her into another kiss. As they kissed, Mimosa cupped his face while he held her waist. She lifted one leg, completely lost in the moment, caring about nothing else. The sound of their lips meeting echoed through the empty space of the mirror dimension. After a while, they pulled back slightly, their faces still close as they caught their breath, both smiling widely. Stephen let out a small chuckle. And to think we said we were going to take it slow, he teased. Mimosa laughed lightly, their faces still close. Her fingers traced his features as if committing them to memory. I'm not complaining. Neither am I, Stephen muttered as their faces moved closer for another kiss. Mimosa skipped back into her room from the mirror dimension and spun around on one foot before flopping onto her bed in a starfish position, letting out a contented sigh. Her fingers lingered on her lips as she remembered the sensation of their kiss. They then trailed down past her chin to her golden clover necklace. She held it up, gazing at it with a smile before pressing a kiss to it. "My very own good luck charm," she whispered. Mimosa rolled around on her bed, her face turning bright red as she held her cheeks. "Ugh! I can't stop thinking about it. Am I becoming a naughty girl? Is it wrong for me to want to drag him here and continue with the kissy-kissy? Would it have turned into something more?" She covered her face with her hands and rolled around more vigorously, muffling her scream. "I'm so shameful. Bad Mimosa. No naughty thoughts." Taking a deep breath, she fanned her flushed face to calm down. She sat up, crossing her legs on the bed as she gazed at her pendant with a wary expression. "I almost forgot I'm not the only one attracted to him. There are other girls who love him too." Flashback. "I'll just order a carriage, don't worry about us, Mimosa," Noelle said awkwardly. Mimosa stared at Noelle with a straight expression. "I have a question, and I hope you'll answer honestly. Why were you two following us?" "Ha ha ha, what? We weren't following you," Noelle scoffed, waving Mimosa off nervously. "You shouldn't lie." "Heek, lying is bad," Stephen hiccuped, his gaze unfocused. Noelle shot Stephen a glare that suggested she wanted to beat him up. Mimosa turned to Wanda with a raised brow. "Well. Wanda mumbled, scratching the back of her head awkwardly. She hadn't expected the confrontation and was left speechless. When no one answered, Mimosa sighed. "You're both in love with him, aren't you?" "What?" Both Wanda and Noelle shrieked. Their attention shifted to Stephen, who had stood up and was now chasing Nero around, laughing gleefully. Noelle and Wanda panicked, their faces flushed as they waved their arms frantically, trying to dissuade Mimosa. "Love him? Pfft, there's just no way," Noelle said, blushing profusely. I'm eternally grateful to Stephen. Without him, I would have been stuck for all eternity, but love is too far-fetched. I admire him greatly and have immense respect for him," Wanda said, her own blush deepening. Realizing her explanation was backfiring, Noelle shifted the focus. It was all Wanda's idea. She planned everything, even had Finral teleport us. She even borrowed these binoculars from Gordon. "What?" Wanda exclaimed, looking betrayed. "I only came up with the plan because I saw how devastated you were when you found out he and Mimosa were going on a date. Since we're in the same squad, I wanted to help you out and support you. I wasn't devastated." "Where did you even get that idea?" Noelle shouted back. "Last night, you went to Stephen's room and waited outside his door to thank him. When you walked away, you were crying," Wanda retorted, pointing at Noelle. "You saw that?" Noelle asked, horrified. "Of course I did. I can't sleep alone, I get lonely, so I go to Stephen's room. I witnessed the whole scene." Wanda's eyes widened as she slapped her hands over her mouth, realizing what she had said. They both turned slowly to Mimosa, who was looking at Wanda with a raised brow. "You do what now?" "It's nothing sexual or anything like that," Wanda sighed, lowering her hands before ruffling her hair awkwardly. "Ever since Stephen rescued me from my imprisonment, I can't stand being alone. I go to him because, with him, I don't feel like I'll be trapped again, and I know that if I ever were, he would rescue me." Wanda looked away in embarrassment. "But like I said, it's not love." Wanda, Noelle said softly. "If you couldn't sleep alone, you should have told us. We would have been more than happy to spend the night with you." Mimosa looked at Wanda with a hint of pity before glancing at Noelle and sighing. "Stephen has done a lot for them and they seem to love him, even if they don't realize it yet. Could I be so selfish as to keep him for myself?" Mimosa thought. She shook her head and sighed. "I'm not really mad that you were both being creeps and stalking us on our date." Still as blunt as ever, "Hey!" Noelle muttered. "The thing is, Stephen and I aren't officially together. We're in a sort of test run. We agreed that if either of us falls in love with someone else, we'd call off the engagement amicably. So you shouldn't feel like you've lost just because he and I went on a date." "Hey? Why are you telling us this?" Noelle asked, confused. "Shouldn't you keep that information to yourself and keep other girls away so they don't think they have a chance of stealing him from you?" Mimosa shrugged. "Probably, but it wouldn't be fair to Stephen." "You're naive," Noelle said, sighing heavily. Mimosa shook her head. "Anyway, it's getting late. I should go. Noelle and Wanda watched as Mimosa walked over to Stephen. He raised his arms in excitement and hugged her. Mimosa smiled before heading off with Stephen in tow. Wait a minute, where do you think you're taking him? Noelle yelled, realizing Mimosa's true intentions. Both Wanda and Noelle chased after Mimosa as she tried to run away with Stephen. Mimosa sighed as she lay in bed, replaying the memories of the night before. I really need to work on my cardio, she muttered to herself. She gazed at her four-leaf clover pendant, twirling it thoughtfully. Even though Stephen is my fiancé, I don't want to make Noelle sad. She's someone I greatly admire, and hurting her is the last thing I'd want. She kissed the pendant once more. If only there were a way for all of us to be happy together with us. Mimosa sat up suddenly, touching her chin and hooking a finger over her lips as she smiled. Maybe there is a way. Chapter 67, Strange Sudden Mission. Third Person's POV. When Stephen returned from his intimate meeting with Mimosa, he immediately noticed Wanda waiting in the dimly lit corridor. Her eyes were wide with urgency, the flickering torches casting shadows over her worried expression. Stephen. Wanda's voice broke through the quiet, echoing off the stone walls. He glanced back as the shimmering barrier of the mirror dimension sealed shut behind him, dispersing into faint tendrils of light. Yet? He asked, his brow creasing in concern. Yami left me here to wait for your return, she began, her words hurried. What? What's going on? Stephen's voice hardened, eyes narrowing as a sense of foreboding crept up his spine. Wanda took a breath to steady herself, strands of her auburn crimson hair catching in the soft draft. We received an urgent call from the Magic Knight's headquarters. Reports came in that children from neighboring towns have been abducted. Asta and Ghosh were already on the scene when it happened, but they sent word back for reinforcements. Vanessa was too drunk to be reliable, Charmy is incapacitated after overeating, and Luck and Magna exhausted themselves sparring. Yami couldn't risk sending Noelle or me alone due to our inexperience, so he decided to intervene himself. He took Finral half awake and Noelle, leaving me behind to inform you. Stephen's expression darkened as he took in the gravity of the situation. His jaw tightened before he gave a sharp nod. All right, follow me. He led Wanda down the stone corridor to his chamber, their hurried footsteps reverberating with an anxious cadence. As they stepped inside, the room glowed faintly from enchanted orbs lining the shelves, illuminating the artifacts resting on their stands. Stephen went and activated the orb of Agamotto, which was in the shape of a globe. Show us the location of Captain Yami and the others, Stephen commanded, spreading his fingers around the sphere as if embracing its energy. The orb spun faster, a soft hum filling the room before it halted with a resonant click, projecting a shimmering map into the air. A pinpoint of light marked Yami's location. Stephen flicked his fingers, zooming in on the scene until it took form in a battlefield. Yami stood gripping Asta by the head, the young knight's legs kicking in protest, while Noelle hovered nearby, a worried smile tugging at her lips. Opposite them loomed Voltos, sneering, and another figure Stephen hadn't encountered before, the imposing Licht, whose presence radiated an aura of ominous light. If I say do it, you do it. You'll turn into a big man that way, Yami barked, smoke curling from his lips as he released Asta. Stephen's eyes darted to Wanda, his brow quirked. Do they even need us? Wanda's cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and uncertainty. Captain Yami said to bring you, so, here we are. Stephen exhaled sharply, a hint of a smirk ghosting over his lips. All right. He deactivated the orb and crossed the room, his crimson cloak of levitation leaping from its stand and fastening itself around his shoulders. Dragon Fang flew from its stand, its blade gleaming as it slid into place at his side of his sash. Nero, the sharp-eyed anti-magic bird, cawed once and settled on Stephen's shoulder. With a quick motion, Stephen summoned a swirling orange portal. He glanced at Wanda, his eyes determined. Let's go. They stepped through, and the battlefield unfurled around them, the stench of charred earth and the metallic tang of magic thick in the air. Stephen landed beside Yami and Asta just as Volto's expression twisted in irritation. The spatial mage's eyes narrowed, he recognized that portal anywhere. Ah, perfect timing. Yami grunted, barely turning as he continued to drag on his cigarette. I was just about to teach this brat something new. Might as well make it a group lesson. A glimmer of light caught Stephen's attention. Licht stood a short distance away, a fresh gash marking his otherwise flawless face. His expression serene. Light recovery magic, healing light particles. A blinding glow enveloped him, mending the cut within seconds. Asta's eyes widened in disbelief. He can heal himself too. Yami snorted, unfazed. Some mages loved by Mana can do almost anything. Now pay attention. He finally set Asta down and looked over both Steven and Asta simultaneously. Back where I come from, there's something called ki. It's how I keep up with his light speed attacks. Ki. Asta echoed, confusion etched on his dirt-smeared face. Not mana. Steven's eyes narrowed as he processed Yami's words, intrigue sparking in his mind. Ki. Is it like chi, are they the same thing? And what does he mean the place from where he's from? Yami glanced back at Asta, then Steven. It's not just a form of energy. It's awareness. Sensing the eyes on you, the breath around you, the shifting of muscles, it's all ki. I use it to predict his moves before he makes them. I then move accordingly to what I predict he's going to do. In a swift motion, Yami spun and deflected an incoming light attack from Licht, the dark edge of his katana slicing through the spell. When I do it, I combine it with magic and muscles and fight that way. It's like being a magic swordsman or something. Valtos looked slightly annoyed as he watched Yami instruct them, talking in the middle of a fight. How insolent! You mustn't get serious, Master Licht. I know this is impertinent of me to ask, but can I take care of them? I owe that the White Streak wizard for last time. Licht only smiled towards Vatos. Thank you, Valtos, you're always so helpful. In that case, capture them both. You are allowed to injure them both. An easy task, Valtos said as he conjured two balls of magic with two small black portals in front of them, aimed directly behind both Steven and Asta. Steven whirled, conjuring an eldritch shield in an instant to block the attack behind him. The magic crashed and dissipated against his shield. Yami intercepted the other, cutting it midair to save Asta. Hey! Asta exclaimed, looking back. That was close. Wait, did you do it just now, Steven? Did you sense ki? Asta asked, flabbergasted. No, Steven said, shaking his head. I used my magic detection and sensed when the attack appeared behind me, Steven explained with a sigh. Great timing, practice on the slanted eye creep over there with the lines over his face. Yami ordered. Oh, and Steven, unless you can't sense it with ki, don't bother blocking and let it you. Only when you're able to sense it with your ki will I allow you to block it. Both Steven and Asta immediately began to protest against such idiotic orders. It's too soon. There's no way I can handle, Asta shouted. While Steven looked at Yami weirdly. What? You want me to be purposely hit, just because I can't feel ki? Are you trying to get me killed? Yami smirked, smoke trailing as he spoke. Where I'm from, there's a saying, a warrior never breaks his word. Asta, you said you were going to be the Wizard King, didn't you? Yami asked before looking at Steven. As for you, I'm sure you promised yourself something, otherwise you wouldn't be working so hard either. Yami then alternated his gaze as he held his cigarette by his mouth. So right here and now, surpass your limits, there's just no other way you can accomplish your dreams if you don't. Asta's hesitation melted into fierce determination. He brandished his buster sword, eyes locked onto Valtos. Yes, sir. Meanwhile, Steven let out a sigh as he pulled his sword from his sash and held it with both hands. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. You just had to say something cool. Chapter 68, Strange vs. Licht, 1, unedited. Third person's POV. Valtos scoffed as he saw both Steven and Asta closing their eyes with their hands on their swords. He summoned more portals behind them and thrusted his ball of magic power in the small portals. As Asta heard the sound of the portal opening behind him, he rapidly turned around and slashed his sword down. Here. However, he misjudged the trajectory of the ball, which caused it to fly past his sword and into his arm, making him grunt in pain as it hit and exploded along his arms. Yami kicked him on the back. Wrong. Asta tumbled forwards a bit as he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment, while Yami explained what he did wrong. You just reacted to your ears that time. That isn't key. Use all 5 of your senses. Visualize something between predicting and instincts. That's easier said than done, Asta muttered as he closed his eyes, took a deep breath and exhaled from his mouth. Concentrate. Meanwhile, Steven didn't turn around as he felt a stinging explosion of mana by the back of his shoulders, followed by another one at the center of his back. I'll cheat a little bit with this, the eye of Agamotto let me see the unseen opening my third eye. Not to mention I'm a doctor, feeling the life force of things should be easy. Thanks to the eye of Agamotto, Steven saw himself surrounded by his life force like a flame around his body. His finger around the hilt of his blade twitched as more and more magic bullets hit his body, making him bleed slightly. Meanwhile Yami looked at Steven with narrowed eyes. What the hell is up with this kid? I only told him to sense ki and he goes ahead and moves on step further, already manipulating it, surrounding his blade. Meanwhile Asta only saw darkness before he detected it. He rapidly turned around and deflected the mana bullet back towards the portal, hitting Voltoa with his one attack. While Steven rapidly turned around, cut the mana bullet perfectly in half, splitting it too before it dissipated into mana. Yes! Asta cheered, pumping his fist excitedly. Ha 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 ha! I did it, Captain Yami! What? Already? What a bunch of weirdos, Yami said with a creeped out look. Steven was off to the side with a proud expression. Nice. I managed to detect where the spell was structurally the weakest point at and cut it down using ki. As Voltos was groaning in pain on the ground, Licht looked towards him worriedly. Voltos. He slowly looked towards the black bowls with a crazed look. You harmed Voltos. I can't allow people like you to harm my friends more than once. You have already crossed the line. The pages of Licht's grimoire began rapidly flipping by in response to his emotions as he started activating a spell. Asta looked at Licht weirdly. What's with you? You picked this fight yourself. Who is he anyways? Steven questioned with a confused expression. Noelle stepped forwards as she answered, he's Licht, the leader of the Eye of the Midnight Sun. He's the one who hurt and put Fuegoleon in the coma. A sudden flash of light radiated from Licht as a long whip of light materialized in his hands. Light creation magic, light whip of judgment. The path this spell traces resembles that of a whip. Could you predict its movement? He said with a crazed expression. However, before he could attack, Steven stepped forward, rapidly rotated his hands and thrusted 2 fingers from each hand forward as he muttered, I summon the shield of the Seraphim to protect us. Arcane magic, shield of the Seraphim. A large eldritch materialized in front of them, which blocked the whip from touching them. The whip was moving at a blinding speed. It rapidly moved around the cave in which they resided in. Ha 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 ha. Licht laughed maniacally as large boulders and rocks began to fall all around them, causing the cave to start collapsing on top of them. Ha 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 ha. The nutcase has gone ballistic. Yami laughed as he saw the destruction around them. Boom. The entire cave collapsed on top of everyone, leaving Licht to be perfectly okay as the sun shone perfectly down on him. Oops, Licht chuckled, trying to appear all innocent. It appears that even though I only used a bit of my magic, it was all too fragile. Licht's speech was interrupted as an explosion of crimson chaotic energy erupted from everyone who was buried. Wanda was hyperventilating as she had a crazed look on her face, her crimson hair floating upwards as she began to levitate from the ground, her magical aura rising even higher. Yami looked towards Steven and asked, what's wrong with her? Wanda put a hand over her ears as she closed her eyes. No close spaces. I hate being buried. Wanda suddenly spread and lifted her arms. All the large rocks and rubble suddenly lifted from the ground, surrounded by a crimson hue as her eyes glowed with a red energy. Steven looked towards Yami awkwardly. She's a tiny bit claustrophobic, he said as he pinched his fingers. Wanda waved her arms towards Licht, causing all the rubble to fly towards him at a terrifying speed. Licht, seeing this, took up a stance as began to use the whip to cut apart the approaching rubble, his whip moving at light speed as he was destroying the approaching rubble. With a flick of her finger, Wanda snatched the light whip from his hands. It rapidly flew through the air before it landed on her own hands. She rapidly flew towards Licht as he stared at his own hands in surprise. He looked back up only to see Wanda appear before him. She rapidly began using the whip against him. Smack! 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 Do not put me in a confined space! Wanda screeched. Arg! Licht screamed in pain. His robe was shattered. His skin was covered with large whip wounds drawing out blood, his face had a long whiplash as blood splattered everywhere. Licht rapidly turned into light particles as he distances himself from Wanda. Master Licht! You bitch! Voltos shouted with worry before looking at Wanda with hate. Wanda held out a hand towards Voltos and beckoned him forth with a hand. She had her hand around his neck and just started squeezing. Voltos made a gurgling sound as he tried to pry off her hand but couldn't move her an inch as she lifted him off the ground. She just stared at him with her ominous crimson eyes and cold expression. Voltos held his hand and shot forth his mana bullets only for them to change trajectory and miss her completely. Soon Voltos' eyes turned red as horror filled his expression, his mind was slowly grumbling due to fear and began to shake and gasp for air. Yami looked at Wanda with a frown, her ki is in a chaotic state. Yami looked towards Steven, you're up kick, like we talked about, she's your mess to fix. Stop her before she does something she regrets. I'm on it, Steven said with a small frown as he levitated from the ground and flew rapidly towards her direction. Wanda just continued to squeeze Valto's neck as drool slowly escaped from his mouth as he was slowly becoming brain dead to the fear. Just as she decided to snap his neck, a hand appeared over her arm, her eyes slowly turned to look at Steven. Drop him, Wanda, Steven said with a sympathizing gaze. Wanda's eyes shook slightly as she gazed at Steven. Steven moved her head and pressed her against his chest. You aren't in a confined space anymore, remember I got you out. You can also look up and see the rays from the sun. You're free now. Wanda's hand around Valto's softened as both their red eyes began to dim. Valto's dropped to the ground, gasping for him in a faraway look. Although he was still alive, his mind was already damaged. Wanda hugged Steven, tears streaming down her face. As Steven held her head, he suddenly raised his arm to the side, a large shield materializing in his hands, blocking the speeding balls of light that came rapidly flying his way. He still hadn't dissipated his spell from earlier. Steven looked towards Valto's with a frown. Can't you see we're having a moment here? Licht had a crazed look as spheres of shimmering light spun around him. I will kill her for what she did to me and Valto's. Chapter 69, Strange vs. Licht, 2. Third person's POV. Licht began using his light particle spell to heal the wounds Wanda had created over his body. Go with the others, I'll hold him back, Steven said as he stood in front of Wanda. Swords which appeared more like crosses made from light magic surrounded Licht before he swung his arm and threw them all at Steven. Light creation magic, light sword of judgment. Steven only calmly raised his shield, blocking all light spells from reaching him. Afterwards Steven dispelled the shield and made a new hand sign as he frowned. Green magic circles appeared around his as he muttered a rapid incantation in a foreign tongue. Time magic, temporal pause. Time came to a complete halt under Steven's command. Steven floated upwards, but as he did he felt Licht's gaze upon him as he followed his movements. Steven smirked, interesting, so he could still keep up even with time behind frozen. Steven made a few more hand signs by his chest, summoning mystical power to form in front of him. He thrusted his palms forwards towards light, sending out a mystic bolt of energy. It rapidly flew through the air, rupturing the swords of light frozen in the air in its path. However, just as it approached Licht, he was surrounded by his magic power, giving off a blind glow. As the bolt was about to touch him, he turned into a streak of light and appeared behind Steven with a crazed look in his eyes, a sword in hand ready to swing it down. Time magic, temporal glitch. As Licht swung his sword across Steven's figure, his body glitched as he blended into the stream of time for just a second. Although he was present, he wasn't actually there as the sword passed through him, thus the glitch. Due to Steven constantly practicing his hand signs and incantations, he had trained himself to speak and weave his hand signs at a supernatural speed. I unleash the mighty winds of Watum. Arcane magic, winds of Watum. In between Steven's green magic circles, orange ones soon appeared around his wrist. Steven blocked Licht's sword-wielding hands and palm thrusted Licht's abdomen. Steven unleashed a powerful whirlwind from his palm which sent Licht flying forwards. Steven used the winds to carry Licht to the majority of the cave. Multiple cuts appeared on his body as he screamed in pain. Steven then thrusted his hands downwards which pushed Licht down to the cavern's ground, making him cough blood as he was violently thrusted to the ground. The giant whirlwind with an orange hue followed Licht to the ground and violently spun around him, digging up at the ground, burying him deep inside a large hole. Steven started spinning a hand in a large circle, causing another whirlwind to appear. The rubbles and large boulders swirled around inside the forming tornado before they were touched over to the large hole, filling it up to the brim, burying Licht deep inside. Steven landed back on the ground and began dusting off his hands as the green magic circles began to fade, returning time back to its natural flow. Hey! Asta looked back and forth in confusion. What's going on? Where did the guy go? I did to him what I do with all my trouble, bury them deep inside so that they don't bother anyone, Steven said proudly as he appeared with Wanda next to everyone. Noelle just looked at Steven weirdly, while Wanda chuckled. Yami just let out a sharp exhale, releasing a cloud of smoke. That isn't a healthy thing to do, Gramps, as if you keep them bottled down for too long. Yeah, I know, they build up and explode, Steven sighed in resignation. And almost like on Kabutum. An explosion of magical power unleashed upwards, a pillar of light shot forth from the where Licht was buried. All the rocks and rubble were disintegrated as Licht slowly rose up. His fists were clenched as he was covered in blood, his clothes dirty and tattered, his blonde hair rose to air as he was heaving his extreme of pure hatred and rage. Both Yami and Asta pointed to Steven as they distanced themselves from him. He did it. What? Steven exclaimed in surprise, looking side to side between Asta and Yami. It's time you suffer retribution for sins, Licht said with a cold, expressionless look. His grimoire flipped through its pages as a giant sphere of light began to materialize in front of him. This is my greatest spell. Speed of which you could never avoid, a spell with such a range and output it would bypass any shield you could conjure up. You'll meet your end the moment I release this alongside those of you which hurt my friend. Licht chuckled maniacally. Yami looked at Steven as he said, Hey Gramps, need help? This could be bad for your eyes if you stare at the light for too long. I know how the older you get the more sensitive they become. Don't worry, I got a set of eyes perfect for this job, Steven said as he stepped forwards. Yami looked at Steven with a hand over his mouth as he began to fake cry. He's already walking towards the light. Sniff, I thought he still had a few years more on him. Let the joke die already. Steven shouted back angrily towards Yami. Veins appeared around Licht's forehead as he saw he still wasn't taken seriously. Die for your sins. Light creation magic, ray of divine judgment. The ground erupted as the enormous ray of light shot forth towards everyone. Steven made an eye-opening gesture with his hand which opened up the eye of Agamotto. Steven thrusted his hand forwards as the eye opened up revealing a golden eye. The amulet shot out from Steven's neck and floated in front of the magical attack. Much to Licht's and everyone else's surprise, they stared in shock as all of that magical power and energy was being absorbed into Steven's amulet. As it was all absorbed the eye slowly closed shut. Woohoo! Nice work Steven! Asta cheered pumping his fist. You guys haven't seen nothing yet, Steven smirked as he snapped his fingers for theatric effects. The eye of Agamotto snapped opened as a bright flash of light shone. The eye of Agamotto blasted back the attack it absorbed at double the strength. A large crevice was made along the ground as it shot forward at a breakneck speed. All Licht could do was stare back in horror as he was engulfed by the counter-attack. The ground was scorched and red, letting out steam due to how hot the light was. Steven bowed his head as the eye of Agamotto floated back over his neck. Yami let out a whistle. Talk about a counter. Is he even alive? Noel wondered with a worried expression. Yami knocked him upside the head. You better not have killed off our potential witness, you numbskull. Ow, Steven muttered, rubbing his head. Don't you use key, he's alive, I can still feel it, don't worry. Oh right, Yami nodded before they all walked over towards Licht. Licht now appeared, Licht a burnt victim. Most of his skin was blackened with red burn marks, his hair was scorched off leaving only small patches of hair, while his eyebrows were completely gone. He was still breathing and awake but barely and clearly through a lot of pain. So he's clearly seen better days, haha, don't you guys agree? Steven asked with a wary chuckle. Chapter 70, Strange Comrades Appear. Third Person's POV. Steven focused intently, healing Licht just enough so that he wouldn't suddenly die but wouldn't have the strength to retaliate, the raw magic weaving through his body like an invisible thread. As he finished, a sudden flash of green light illuminated the room. Everyone turned in unison to see a glowing green portal materializing behind them. Out of it stepped Gotch and Finral, both ready for battle, their bodies tense as they surveyed the scene. They froze, eyes wide, as they took in the sight of an unresponsive Voltos and a barely conscious Licht, while the others stood around them. You guys are late, Yami remarked with an unreadable expression. Late? We were rushing, thinking you guys were in danger. I even had the precious encouraging words from my lovely Marie pushing me forward. Gotch shouted, pointing a finger toward them, his voice tinged with frustration. He closed his eyes and let out a deep breath, his face turning red as a nosebleed suddenly appeared. He hugged his body, muttering, I have Marie's magic power coursing through me, I can't let it go to waste. So who defeated him? I must defeat them too, so it'll be like I defeated him as well. It was all Steven. Asta and Yami replied simultaneously, stepping aside. Would the two of you please stop throwing me under the bus? Steven snapped, glaring at the two of them. And seriously, dude, your sister complex is honestly concerning. Steven chose to ignore Gotch's weird complex and turned toward Yami, his eyes narrowed. I have a technique that allows me to extract information from him. Then what are you waiting for? Get to it, Yami commanded, his tone nonchalant as he gestured toward Licht. Let's find out what these bastards are hiding. With a swift motion, Steven levitated Licht off the ground, his palms glowing faintly as he thrust them toward Licht's chest. But as he did, something unexpected occurred. Their eyes widened in shock as two astral forms, one of Licht and the other of William Van Jans, emerged from Licht's body, swirling in the air like separate entities. Yami's expression grew cold as he narrowed his eyes. What's the meaning of this? Isn't that the leader of the Golden Dawn? The squad from where Yuno is from? Asta exclaimed, his voice full of disbelief. Yami turned his gaze to Stephen, his face now serious. What was that technique you just used? Why are we seeing both of these figures? In layman's terms, my technique separates the body from the soul, Stephen explained, his voice calm despite the situation. However, it seems that in this case, two souls were inhabiting the same body. Yami's expression turned grave as he processed the information. I see. So that's how they were able to infiltrate the kingdom. They had an insider's help. Use your technique to get them to answer my questions, Yami urged, his voice carrying an edge of urgency. I have plenty of questions, and I need answers. Stephen nodded and began using his magic to hypnotize both souls. Their eyes flickered open, but they remained half-lidded, their bodies slack as they fell under his control. Just as Stephen was about to extract answers, a new presence was felt. Everyone turned toward a growing black portal that began to form behind them. Their focus snapped to Valtos, but he remained slumped on the ground, drool dripping from his mouth, still unconscious. Then, three figures emerged from the portal, each one stepping out with an air of quiet confidence. Yami's hand instinctively moved to his sword, his grimoire floating in front of him, prepared for a fight. But before he could react, one of the figures, a man with black hair and a white patch, appeared in front of Yami in the blink of an eye, touching his grimoire with a bored expression. The man yawned lazily, his voice dripping with indifference. Wow, things got pretty real here. Normally, I'd think everything's too much work, but even I have to save my buddies. He glanced down at the grimoire he was touching and smirked. Hey? That's a weird pattern, but whatever. Yami clicked his tongue in frustration. I got careless. I didn't expect him to move at light speed as well. Without missing a beat, Yami activated his magic. Dark magic, dark cloak, limitless slash. A massive crescent of dark energy sliced through the air, aimed directly at the man. The figure jumped back, attempting to evade the attack. Though he managed to avoid the brunt of the strike, the edge of the blade grazed his arm, drawing a pained yelp. Ow! What a pain in the ass! The man groaned, his voice dripping with annoyance. Stephen turned his attention back to Licht, his brow furrowed. Who are they? Licht's voice came out in a monotone, trance-like state. Those are my friends. They are the strongest three of the Eye of the Midnight Sunday. In combat, they surpass me. They are the third eye. Raya the Disloyal, Licht continued, his eyes vacant as he spoke. Raya, a tall man with dark hair and a faint, almost mocking smile, held his hand over his wound. Tiny particles of light swirled from his palm, healing the damage almost instantly. Light magic, healing light particles. How is he using that magic as well? Noelle gasped in disbelief, her eyes wide. Licht's voice echoed again, then there's Fana the Hateful. Fana, a woman with wild, long pink hair and a crazed glint in her eyes, pointed forward, her voice filled with venom. All those who hurt Licht deserve nothing but a painful death. As she spoke, a fiery red lizard spirit appeared on her shoulder, its mouth opening wide as it unleashed a torrent of searing flames. Spirit magic, Salamander's breath. Noelle's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly raised her wand, summoning her own magic to counter the flames. Water creation magic, Sea Dragon's Lair. A massive dome of water encased them, shielding everyone from the inferno. But as Fana's flames collided with the water barrier, an explosion of steam erupted, obscuring their vision. Through the thick, swirling mist, a shadow darted past, moving with impossible speed. Licht's voice, barely audible, carried through the fog. Enveto the Despairer. In the fog everyone then soon heard, I call forth the winds of Watum. Arcane magic, winds of Watum. Suddenly, the steam parted as a powerful gust of wind swept through the area, clearing the fog. The sound of magic filled the air as the figures of Licht's comrades were revealed. Veto, a massive man cloaked in fur from head to toe, had pushed Licht's soul back into his body, lifting the weakened elf with ease. Fana was already tending to him, her healing magic surrounding him with gentle, warm flames. Flame recovery magic, Phoenix robe. Licht, trying to bear all of this alone is a pain. Raya sighed tiredly, his voice tinged with resignation. Veto, his fur bristling with anger, growled low in his throat. How dare you do this to my comrade? Don't think you're getting away with this. I'll tear you apart. Fana, holding Licht close, whispered softly, Licht. Does it hurt? I despise those who hurt you. Chapter 71, Strange vs. Veto. Third person's POV. As Fana delicately tended to Lick's wounds, her magic flickering like a soft flame, she noticed his hand twitch. Slowly, Lick raised his trembling fingers, his lips moving ever so slightly. His voice, a faint murmur, carried words that only the closest to him could hear. His hand pointed toward Stephen's general direction. The atmosphere shifted. The tension was palpable. Veto's head snapped around, followed by Fana and Raya, their gazes locking on Stephen. Confusion furrowed Stephen's brows as he glanced between them. You! Veto roared, his voice a thunderous howl that reverberated like a primal force through the air. His eyes blazed with fury as he took a step forward. Why do you have that? Have what? Stephen replied, narrowing his eyes. His tone was calm but laced with suspicion. The others exchanged puzzled looks, equally baffled by Veto's sudden outburst. Raya moved at the speed of light, materializing before Stephen with uncharacteristic seriousness. His normally aloof demeanor had been replaced by an intense focus as he reached out toward the amulet hanging around Stephen's neck, the Eye of Agamotto. Stephen hesitated, intending to let Raya touch it and activate the amulet's protective spell. But before their confrontation could escalate, a sharp voice cut through the tension. Oi! A blur of motion. Asta appeared between them like a streak of lightning, his sword slashing in an arc toward Raya. The collision of steel rang out, and Raya staggered back, his eyes widening in shock. What strength, Raya thought, steadying himself, his grip tightening on his blade. Stephen blinked at Asta in bewilderment. What are you doing? He asked, his tone almost bewildered. Obviously protecting you and your weird eye thingy majiggy. Asta declared, his voice brimming with indignation. You were just gonna let him take it. That's probably some kind of family heirloom, right? Learn to take better care of your stuff. Stephen sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. I wasn't going to let him take it, he said dryly. And for the record, I don't need protection. Before Stephen could argue further, Raya regrouped, his hand resting on the hilt of his katana. Dark magic, dark cloak, limitless slash. A black crescent of energy erupted from Raya's blade, hurtling toward Asta. Undeterred, Asta swung his anti-magic sword, slicing the dark energy apart with ease. Watching from a distance, Yami smirked, a cigarette dangling from his lips. Hey, you bastard! He yelled at Raya, his tone equal parts irritated and amused. You trying to get sued for copyright? Don't go using my moves. Meanwhile, Stephen's attention remained on Veto. The beastman's eyes gleamed with primal rage as he suddenly blurred into motion, claws raised. Arcane magic, dark wing. Stephen dissipated into a swarm of ravens just as Veto's claws slashed through where he had stood. Reforming behind the beastman, Stephen's hands crackled with vibrant electricity. Arcane magic, bolt of Balthak. Bright arcs of eldritch energy surged toward Veto, who jumped to dodge and twisted midair to face the oncoming bolts. Beast magic, bear claw. A ferocious roar tore through the battlefield as glowing, orange aura claws enveloped Veto's arms. With savage precision, he slashed apart the incoming bolts, laughing maniacally. Ha 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 ha! Is that all you've got? Beast magic, cheetah charge. Veto vanished in a blur of speed, reappearing just inches from Stephen. His enhanced fist collided with Stephen's hastily conjured shield. Arcane magic, shield of the seraphim. The impact rang like a gong, sending shockwaves rippling through the ground. Stephen gritted his teeth as Veto leaned into the shield, his face twisting into a feral grin. I'm really starting to dislike you, Veto growled. Because I hurt your friend. Stephen taunted, his voice calm yet mocking. That's part of it, Veto admitted, his punches raining down on the shield like cannon fire. But mainly he sniffed the air, his eyes narrowing dangerously. I smell a beast in hiding. And what I hate most is a beast pretending to be weak to fit in. Stephen sighed, exasperated. What the hell are you even talking about? Why am I entertaining this nonsense? He flew upward, putting distance between them. Both hands formed an intricate pattern of gestures, golden light tracing his movements. Magic circles materialized around him, pulsating with power. Arcane magic, mystic storm. Bolts of arcane lightning rained down, tearing through the battlefield. The ground exploded wherever they struck, the sheer force shaking the air itself. Veto's aura flared as he summoned another spell. Beast magic, rhinoceros armor. A shimmering, translucent rhino-shaped aura encased him, bracing against the assault. But Stephen's hands twitched, amplifying the bolt's intensity. The armor cracked, then shattered. A final surge of power struck Veto directly, unleashing an explosion of light and sound that shook the earth. When the dust settled, Veto was kneeling, his body battered and smoking. The ground beneath him had turned to molten slag, evidence of the spell's devastating power. Despite the damage, Veto smirked through gritted teeth, his voice a low growl. "Not bad, but don't think this is over." "I'm surprised you're still standing," Stephen remarked, narrowing his eyes as he studied Veto. There was something unsettling about the way Veto spoke, something that gnawed at Stephen's thoughts, but he decided to keep his concerns to himself for now. Veto let out a deep, guttural laugh as he pushed himself upright, rolling his shoulders with an audible crack. "I'm far more durable and resilient than I look," he said with a sly grin, his voice dripping with confidence. He cracked his neck, the sound echoing in the cavern. "So, when are you going to stop holding back?" Stephen didn't reply. His sharp eyes darkened, glaring at Veto with an intensity that could cut through steel. The silence spoke louder than words, and the air between them grew thick with tension. Veto crouched low, his muscles coiling like a spring. Then, in a sudden burst, he became a distorted blur, moving so fast that the air seemed to ripple around him. Before Stephen could react, before he could even raise another magical shield, Veto's fist connected with his stomach. The impact was devastating. Stephen's breath left him in a violent rush, spit flying from his mouth as his body doubled over. He was launched backward like a missile, the force creating concentric shockwaves in the air. He crashed into the cavern wall with a thunderous boom, embedding deep into the rock as cracks spider-webbed out from the point of impact. For a moment, there was only silence, save for the faint sound of crumbling debris. Luckily, Stephen's instincts had kicked in at the last second, reinforcing his body with magic to absorb the worst of the blow. He pushed himself out of the wall, pieces of shattered stone falling around him, and straightened up with an irritated grimace. Wiping blood from the corner of his mouth, he ran a hand through his hair, slicking it back with a slow, deliberate motion. "He's really starting to piss me off," Stephen muttered under his breath, his voice a low growl of annoyance. He exhaled sharply, then snapped his fingers. The world around him seemed to grind to a halt. Time itself didn't freeze, but everything slowed to a crawl. Green magical circles flickered to life around his wrists, glowing with an ethereal light. In this heightened state of perception, Stephen could see Veto's form frozen mid-lunge, his claws extended toward Stephen with a feral grin plastered across his face. Time magic, temporal velocity. Stephen moved faster than the eye could follow. In an instant, he was gone from the wall. Veto's claws smashed into the stone where Stephen had just been, creating jagged fissures before the entire section of the wall exploded outward in a cloud of rubble and dust. Veto's grin faltered as he realized Stephen was no longer there. He began to scan the cavern, but before he could react, the air around him seemed to erupt. He felt the impact of what seemed like 100 punches landing on a single spot on his torso. The force was so immense that blood erupted from his mouth, and he was sent flying backward like a ragdoll, tearing through the air with a deafening boom as the sound barrier broke. Stephen appeared above Veto as he was still flying through, still moving as a blurred distortion. His fist cocked back, glowing faintly with green energy, and with a downward strike, he slammed Veto into the ground. The force of the impact split the earth, creating a deep crater and shaking the entire cavern like an earthquake. Stephen had picked up Veto's body and hung him in midair for what seemed like an eternity to Stephen. In the blink of an eye, fist-shaped indentations began appearing all over his torso and arms as Stephen's attacks rained down in a relentless onslaught. The sheer speed made it look as though Veto was being held aloft by an invisible force. See Veto's go flying off again. Stephen was not content to stop. Stephen reached forward and grabbed Veto by the face. His green time magic surged around them, and in an instant, they vanished. They reappeared a millisecond later, with Stephen driving Veto's head into the very opposite wall where he had been thrown earlier. Stephen had used his time magic to travel through time and arrived at the time Veto's was supposed to arrive and smash against the wall. The wall groaned under the pressure before giving way, chunks of stone collapsing around them as Stephen released his grip. He stood tall, brushing dust off his shoulder as his magic dimmed. "How's that for holding back?" he asked, his tone dripping with cold disdain. Veto groaned but grinned through bloodied teeth, his sharp fangs glinting in the dim light. Then he began to laugh, a deep, guttural sound that echoed through the cavern. "The beast is still hiding his fangs," he said with a rasp, his eyes gleaming with wild determination. "All you've shown me so far are your claws. Chapter 72, Strange Intervention. Third Person's POV. Meanwhile, as Stephen battled Veto, Asta faced off against Raya. Raya, cloaked in a brilliant aura of light, moved at blinding speeds, his sword shrouded in a menacing veil of darkness. His movements were nearly imperceptible, a blur of radiance and shadow. Asta, undeterred, activated his devil mark. Black energy coursed through his veins as his muscles bulged with newfound strength. With a single burst of power, he cracked the ground beneath him, propelling himself forward with incredible speed to meet Raya head-on. The battlefield became a chaotic spectacle of motion as the two combatants darted through the air. Their figures blurred, clashing at speeds almost too fast for the eye to follow. The air echoed with the metallic clang of swords meeting, their strikes sending shockwaves across the landscape. Captain Yami stood nearby, his sharp eyes darting back and forth, his head swiveling as he kept track of Asta to determine if he needed assistance. However, a small smirk formed on Yami's face as he realized Asta was holding his own. Asta was not only keeping up with Raya's light-speed attacks but was also reacting to them. The occasional clash of their swords rang out, echoing through the battlefield as their blurred figures collided. Raya stepped back, glancing at his sword. The dark aura that had cloaked it was completely dispelled. He clicked his tongue in frustration. Anti-magic, how bothersome, he muttered under his breath. Suddenly, multiple portals appeared around Raya and then around Asta. Light creation magic, light swords of judgment. From the portals erupted countless swords of searing light, their radiant edges aiming straight for Asta. Without hesitation, Asta summoned his second blade. Dual-wielding now, his arms moved in a blur, deflecting the light-speed projectiles with precision. Each blade of light that struck his Demon Slayer sword rebounded, hurtling back through the portals toward Raya. Raya twisted and turned, narrowly dodging the redirected swords. Each missed attack exploded against the ground and walls, creating blinding flashes and sending debris flying. His expression grew grim as he saw Asta adapting so quickly. But Asta wasn't done. With a burst of speed, he thrust one of his swords through a nearby portal. Raya's eyes widened in shock as a searing pain erupted across his side. A large gash appeared along his waist, forcing him to stumble back in agony. The portals vanished as Raya grimaced, clutching his wound. Wasting no time, Asta charged at Raya, his sword raised high, his face marked with deep concentration. Raya gritted his teeth, raising his sword slightly as he clutched his wound. He used Asta's strength to push himself back and away slightly so he could heal. Small particles of light began to flow into the injury. Light recovery magic, healing light particles. Anti-magic really is the bane of all mages, Raya grumbled. Meanwhile, Noelle and Wanda faced off against Fana and the Salamander. Salamander, burn them to a crisp. Fana commanded. The Salamander leapt from her shoulder, growing in size until it resembled a massive dragon. It let out a thunderous roar, gathering flames around its maw. I won't let you! Noelle declared, steadying her wand with both hands. The Salamander's cheeks puffed up before it unleashed a blazing torrent of fire, the air crackling with heat. Water creation magic, Sea Dragon's Legion. A swarm of small, fish-shaped constructs shot from Noelle's wand and clashed with the Salamander's flames, creating a massive thermal explosion. However, the Salamander's breath overwhelmed the water constructs in the blink of an eye. Look out! Wanda shouted, tackling Noelle out of the way. Both grunted as they hit the ground. The immense heat melted the spot where they had stood, the ground bubbling and transforming into molten lava. The Salamander's flames continued to follow them. Wanda quickly got to her feet, curling her fingers as orbs of chaotic energy formed around her hands. She thrust her palms forward, releasing a wave of energy to push back against the flames. Despite her efforts, the heat was unbearable. Wanda conjured a red barrier, holding it up as the spirit flames pressed against it. The Salamander, noticing the resistance, intensified its flames. The barrier began to buckle, and Wanda screamed as the pressure and heat scorched her hands, leaving blisters. Wanda! Noelle cried, worried. Noelle bit her lip, standing up with determination. Holding her wand tightly, she glared at the Salamander. The only way to beat a dragon is with another dragon. Don't fail me now, she whispered, her grimoire glowing as its pages flipped rapidly. Fana, irritated, snapped at the Salamander. What are you doing? Finish them off. You're one of the 4 great spirits, this shouldn't be a problem. The Salamander side-eyed Fana, seemingly unamused by her tone. A glowing blue aura surrounded Noelle and her grimoire as a blank page began to fill with new magic. Wanda, move! Noelle shouted. Wanda took a deep breath, pushing the flames upward as far as she could before diving out of the way. Water creation magic, sea dragon's roar. Noelle thrust her wand forward, and a massive water dragon surged from its tip, roaring as it charged toward the salamander's flames. The two elements collided, taking the shapes of dragons. The clash shook the battlefield, sending steam billowing into the air. As the mist cleared, the dragons were locked in a fierce struggle, neither able to overpower the other. Noelle gritted her teeth, thrusting her wand again to push her dragon forward, but it only moved an inch. Wanda, looking at her blistered hands for a second, gained a determined expression, conjured two orbs of chaos magic, combining them into a large sphere the size of a soccer ball. She stepped behind Noelle and launched the orb, releasing a beam of chaos magic that slammed into the salamander's flames. Noelle and Wanda exchanged determined smiles, then shouted as they combined their strength. Their combined attack surged forward, overpowering the flames and slamming into the salamander. Boom! The explosion sent the salamander flying into Fana, knocking her back into licht. Both were buried under the spirit's weight. Noelle and Wanda laughed in triumph, turning to each other with excitement. They raised their arms and shared a high five. Talk about girl power, hey! Noelle teased. Wanda chuckled, proud of herself. For someone who had only been practicing magic for a week, she felt she had come a long way. Ugh! Fana groaned in annoyance. Get off me! And finish them already! Salamander was briefly unconscious but quickly recovered, leaping off Fana and licked. It opened its gullet, and a spinning ball of intense, concentrated fire began to form in its mouth. The heat and light from the orb intensified rapidly, the air around it shimmering from the immense energy. Meanwhile, Ghosh noticed Noelle and Wanda celebrating too early and yelled at them. Don't celebrate yet, you idiots! Ghosh shouted, a smirk forming on his face as he pushed his hair aside to reveal his mirror eye. My precious Marie, looks like your encouraging words weren't for nothing, Ghosh muttered, his grimoire glowing as he prepared to act. Teleport me to them, now! He ordered Finral. Finral complied, creating a green magic portal. Ghosh leaped through, appearing in front of Wanda and Noelle with his hands extended. Mirror magic, full reflection. The salamander unleashed a concentrated beam of pure heat and magic at blinding speed, tearing through the air like a fiery comet. Before the attack could reach them, a massive mirror materialized, reflecting the devastating beam back toward the salamander and Fana. I just hate you humans, Fana muttered bitterly as the beam hurtled toward them. Boom! The salamander shielded Fana from the reflected attack, its massive form enduring the blazing heat and destructive force of the explosion. A dome of fire and smoke engulfed them as the ground trembled from the impact. Meanwhile, Stephen Strange stood facing Veto, his expression stern. Why did you aim for my amulet? Stephen demanded, his voice calm but commanding. You possess it and don't even know its significance? Talk about unworthy, Veto sneered. You probably don't even know its true name. The Eye of Agamotto. I know its name, but that's not the question I asked, Stephen retorted, his eyes narrowing. Answer me truthfully before I take the information by force. Hat. Veto chuckled darkly. I wonder how much you truly know. His voice trailed off as he studied Stephen intently. The amulet, the cloak of levitation, even the white streak in his hair. Veto seemed to piece something together as his eyes widened. Stephen raised his hand, preparing to cast a spell. Since you've left me no choice, I'll extract the truth myself. Before he could proceed, 3 overwhelming magical signatures descended from above, their power cracking the earth as they landed. As the dust settled, 3 magic knight captains emerged, Charlotte Rosalie of the Blue Rose, Nozel Silva of the Silver Eagles, and Jack the Ripper of the Green Mantis. The captains exuded an aura of sheer dominance, their mana radiating outward as they readied their spells, halfway through activation. Chapter 73, Strange Admission. Third Person's POV. Raya looked at the incoming magic knight captains, then turned to Veto, who was pressed against the wall by Stephen. Shifting his gaze to Fana, he saw smoke billowing from her direction. We're at a disadvantage. These human mages are more bothersome than we expected. It's best to withdraw. A portal appeared beneath both him and Veto simultaneously. Stephen's head snapped toward Veto, and he threw an eldritch whip toward him as they disappeared into the portal. However, the portal severed the whip as it closed, causing Stephen to click his tongue in frustration. He immediately grabbed his sling and looked toward where Veto and Raya had reappeared right next to Fana and licked. Salamander had shrunk down due to his injuries, while another portal opened beneath Voltos, regrouping all of them together. Seeing this, Stephen quickly conjured a portal and followed after them. Raya, sensing the incoming energy, widened his eyes in surprise. He watched as Stephen emerged through his portal, hands outstretched, conjuring 2 magic circles from which beams of mystical energy formed. What frightened Raya most was Stephen's expression or lack thereof. His face was completely void of emotion, but his eyes carried a terrifying intensity. Reacting swiftly, Raya touched Veto's grimoire and cast one of his spells. Beast Magic, Rhinoceros Armor. The rhinoceros armor enveloped all of them, shielding them from Stephen's mystic blast, which exploded in a brilliant orange-yellow eruption. Stephen twisted the magic circle in his hands, amplifying the power of the blast, causing the explosion to intensify. The rhinoceros armor cracked under the force, shattering moments later and giving way to an enormous orange detonation. Through the smoke, Jack the Ripper emerged, followed by Nozzle from one side and Charlotte from the other. Jack suddenly sprouted green blades from his forearms and used his severing magic to cut through the explosion, dispersing it. However, as the smoke cleared, it revealed that Raya and the others had already teleported away. Nozzle and Charlotte froze, while Jack scratched his head. "Look what you did, you let them get away," he said, eyeing Stephen with disappointment. "I let them get away. If you hadn't shown your ugly mug, they wouldn't have run," Stephen retorted angrily. A green portal opened before them, and Yami appeared with reinforcements in tow. "Grandpa over here is right," Yami said, ruffling his hair and exhaling smoke. "We had them, your help was really unnecessary." "We merely responded to the call for reinforcements," Nozzle said flatly. Meanwhile, Asta grinned proudly. "I say, since we sent them running with their tails between their legs, it counts as a victory." "Huzzah!" Noelle rolled her eyes. "That's one way to look at it, but I'm not sure someone else feels the same." She motioned toward Stephen, who looked irritated. Stephen sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair to slick it back. "I'm going back to the base," he muttered, raising his hands to conjure a portal. "Wait a minute!" Ghosh called out, as a small spark ignited in front of Stephen. Stephen paused and looked back, confused. "Yeah. You're a doctor, right? Then I'd like to ask you for a favor," Ghosh said with a serious expression. Later, Stephen sat in a room full of children, smiling warmly as he held their hands. "There, your magic power should return to normal." A nun, Sister Teresa, watched him with gratitude. "Thank you. I suspected that, since their magic was forcefully extracted, they'd never be able to use it again." Stephen stood up and ruffled a child's hair as they thanked him. "I'm just glad I could help." Sister Teresa chuckled. "Sister Lily was right about you, you're good with children." "You know Sister Lily?" Stephen asked with a faint smile. "But of course. Before she became a nun, she trained at this church. When she visited us recently, she mentioned you, Asta, and you know. She spoke about how hard-working you were and how you always helped take care of the other children." Stephen chuckled and shook his head. "Don't tell Asta Sister Lily talked about him. He might get too excited." "Too late," Sister Teresa said with a wary smirk, prompting them both to laugh. "I hate you." Stephen and Teresa exchanged confused looks as they heard Marie shouting. Rushing to investigate, they found Ghosh on the ground, looking utterly defeated, as if his entire world had crumbled. Marie stood before him, arms crossed, pouting heavily. Ghosh glared at Stephen with hatred in his eyes. "This is all your fault. My Marie hates me because of you. Bringing you here was a mistake, you must be eliminated." "What did I do?" "You're the one who asked me to come," Stephen said, bewildered. "What did he do this time?" Teresa asked, turning to Marie. Marie huffed. "I told him I was going to marry Stephen when I grew up, but he said he'd murder him before that could happen. He even forbade me from saying goodbye to him before he left." What?" Stephen muttered, his face turning awkward. "Back in the Black Bull's base, A/N, say that 5 times fast." An orange portal materialized, and out stepped Stephen, waving behind him. "I'll be sure to visit, don't worry," he said as the portal closed behind him. The group sitting around looked on with confused expressions as Stephen carried an unconscious Ghosh slung over his shoulder. Why is Gosha unconscious? I thought he only needed your help at the orphanage, Noelle asked from her seat beside Wanda. Stephen walked over to an empty couch and deposited Gosha onto it unceremoniously. He tried to kill me, Stephen replied flatly. Anyway, I'll be in my room. Only call me if it's an emergency, he added before turning and walking away. Vanessa, slightly buzzed, glanced at the others in confusion. Why is Stephen in such a bad mood? I don't think I've ever seen him like that before. Noelle and Wanda both shrugged, equally perplexed. When Stephen arrived in his room, he let out a heavy sigh. Nero fluttered off his shoulder, landing on the bed and bouncing slightly. You want to meet in the library? Stephen asked. Nero nodded rapidly. All right. Stephen sat on the bed, and Nero flew to his lap. He retrieved his grimoire from the mirror dimension, flipping it open. In the library, Stephen leaned back in his reading table, arms loosely crossed. What's wrong? He asked, his voice calm but distant. Secret stood across from him, studied his face. Before I say what I need to, what's going on with you? She asked, her expression concerned. Stephen shook his head. Don't worry about it. Stephen Secret pressed gently, her tone soft but firm. Stephen clicked his tongue, running a hand through his hair and fiddling with the white streak to calm himself. It's that Veto guy, he pissed me off more than I'd like to admit. Veto? Is it about him accusing you of hiding a beast inside you or pretending to be weak? He was probably just trying to get under your skin, Secret said, her brow furrowed in confusion. Stephen exhaled deeply, rubbing the back of his neck. It's not entirely nonsense. I know what he's talking about. What? Do you really have some kind of ancient beast inside you or something? Secret asked, startled. Stephen chuckled and shook his head. No, it's not literal. Wait, so you do pretend to be weak? Secret blinked, taken aback. Stephen sighed again. It's not pretending, but I do hold back. Quite a lot. Why? Secret asked, visibly confused. Promise you won't laugh, Stephen muttered, a bit embarrassed. I promise, Secret said, her expression serious. Stephen hesitated, then finally spoke. You see, with my magic there's no need to get up all close and personal, long-distance battling should be my specialty. However, I simply love the feeling of getting up and personal with someone, the feeling of my fist hitting against someone's flesh, the danger, the potential of getting hurt, or worse dying. I simply love the exhilaration it brings me, it's a feeling I just can't really describe. However, that feeling honestly scares me a bit. It's not that I enjoy hurting people, I just really love battling. I love seeing the things I'm able to do with my magic against other people. However, I'm sometimes scared that if I use too much power on someone and accidentally kill them, I would end up enjoying it as well and become someone else entirely. So I restrain myself, I hold myself back. And having someone realize and point out the part of me that's holding back and restraining myself from giving into the love of battling, pisses me off. It's like they can see a side of me I try to hide away from everyone, if that makes sense. Secret stared at him, her expression softening. Without a word, she leaned forward and hugged him. I might not fully understand what you're feeling, but I know this: you're no beast. You won't become someone who enjoys killing. You're a doctor, Stephen. You've chosen to dedicate your life to helping people, even if you don't realize it. Someone that enjoys killing wouldn't have done that. And there's nothing wrong with loving to fight. That's perfectly normal. You don't have to be afraid. Stephen let out a shaky breath, looking down at Secret. He cupped her face, pulling her into a deep, lingering kiss. The tension in his chest eased slightly. All right, he said softly, pulling back. Enough about me. What did you want to tell me? Secret's expression turned serious as she leaned back. I've realized what the Midnight Sun is planning and what their true goals are. And I've also figured out who they truly are. She paused, her tone growing heavy. Thanks to that, I now understand why your last name Strange felt so familiar. Chapter 74, Strange History Lesson. Third Person's POV. What? Stephen asked, his voice laced with surprise, his brows furrowing as he stared at her. Secret let out a weary sigh, her expression softening. They're tied to my past, and part of the reason I ended up like this in the first place. Her voice carried the weight of years, each word heavy with memories she had long buried. What? Stephen repeated, but this time his tone was colder, sharper. His narrowed eyes gleamed with suspicion, his demeanor shifting to one of guarded intensity. "It's not what you're thinking," Secret quickly clarified, her voice calm but firm. "They're not the ones who forced me to use the forbidden spell. But they are connected to it. Let me start with who or what the Eye of the Midnight Sun truly is." She paused, taking a steadying breath before continuing. "They are elves. Elves from 500 years ago. They should have been long dead, but it seems they've survived, or rather, been reborn." Stephen's eyebrows shot up. "Elves?" he asked incredulously, motioning toward his own ears with his hands, stretching them upward for emphasis. "You mean those beings? Beloved by Mana, with long lifespans and pointy ears?" Secret gave him a small nod, a faint smile tugging at her lips despite the gravity of her tale. "Yes, those kinds of beings. But for you to understand my connection to the elves, there's something else you need to know about me." Her gaze turned serious, and she held Stephen's eyes as she spoke. "I've told you before that I was a servant, but I never told you who I served. I, Secret Swallowtail, was the servant and caretaker of the first wizard king of the Clover Kingdom, Lemuel Silvermillion Clover." Stephen's jaw dropped. "What?" he exclaimed, his voice echoing in the room. He stared at her as though she had just claimed to be royalty herself. Secret looked away, awkwardly nodding. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then Stephen spoke again, his tone oddly contemplative. "You weren't in love with him, were you?" Secret blinked, her expression shifting to one of pure disbelief. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice sharp with indignation. "Seriously? This is an important conversation we're having, and that's your question?" Stephen scratched the back of his neck awkwardly, avoiding her piercing glare. "It's a genuine question. Don't most servants fall in love with their masters? I mean, I've seen the first Wizard King's statue. He's not bad looking, so I wouldn't be surprised if some of his servants felt something for him." Secret's deadpan stare could have turned him to stone. "Again, I must ask, seriously?" Stephen mumbled, still not meeting her eyes. "I mean, it's just the selfish part of me talking. I'm not going to judge you or anything. It's fine if you were in love with someone else you're 500 years old, for crying out loud. But, there's this selfish part of me that kind of wants to be your first." Her exasperation melted as she saw the faint blush on his cheeks. Despite herself, she rolled her eyes and smiled softly. "I wasn't in love with the Wizard King," she admitted. "I held a deep respect and admiration for him, yes. But love? No." Secret stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his cheek. "Thanks to that all-seeing eye of yours, you know I'm telling the truth when I say this, you're the first and only person I've ever loved." Stephen's face lit up with a grin he tried to hide by glancing downward. His hand reached up to cover hers, holding it against his cheek. Secret rolled her eyes again, though she couldn't help but find his reaction endearing. With a light tap on his chest, she said, "Can I continue with my story now?" Stephen chuckled sheepishly. "Yeah, sorry. Go ahead." Secret took a deep breath before resuming. "As I was saying, I served the first Wizard King. His Majesty was a visionary who dreamed of coexistence between humans and elves. He befriended Licht, the leader of the elves, and their bond grew strong due to their similar ideals. Over time, the king's sister and Licht met frequently, and their connection blossomed into love. They were set to be married and were even expecting a child." Secret paused for a moment before continuing. It seemed like His Majesty's wish of coexisting with the elves was finally going to come true. However, as you can tell by now, that wasn't the case. I'll spoil the ending for you. All of the elves were massacred. Not a single one was spared. All of this happened because of the manipulation of a demon, a devil, whatever you want to call it. He set up a trap for His Majesty, and while I managed to free him from it, by the time we arrived, it was too late. The elves were already slaughtered, and the only one left alive was Licht. The devil tricked the elves into believing that His Majesty had betrayed them. Consumed by despair, Licht's grimoire transformed into a 5-leaf clover grimoire, giving the devil the opportunity to take over Licht's body. Just as the devil was about to succeed, His Majesty and I arrived. Seeing us made Licht realize that His Majesty wasn't the one who betrayed him, and he managed to stop the devil from fully possessing him. However, the only way Licht could prevent the devil's plan was by turning himself into a demon. He used the magic stones crafted by the elves to transform into a giant demon and begged His Majesty to finish him off. You remember that demon skull in Hage village where you used to train? That's licked? Stephen asked in astonishment, trying to process what he was hearing. Secret nodded in confirmation. While the devil watched in amusement as His Majesty defeated Licht, I used the same magic stones Licht had used to seal the demon in an eternal prison. But just before I could complete the spell, the devil managed to grab the stones and used them to capture the suspended souls of the elves, reincarnating them and himself into the future. Or rather, into the present. Wait, so your failed spell backfired and turned you into the anti-magic bird? Stephen asked, still confused about her fate. Secret shook her head. After the devil escaped and His Majesty defeated Licht, he was left mortally wounded from the battle. Knowing the devil would one day return to wreak havoc on the Clover Kingdom, I used a forbidden spell. I turned His Majesty into a statue, ready for the day the devil would return. For his deeds in defeating the demon and saving the kingdom, he became known as the first Wizard King. And as a result of the forbidden spell, I was transformed into an anti-magic bird. That's insane! Stephen exclaimed, clearly in shock. That statue is the first Wizard King's actual body. Secret nodded solemnly. Licht's goal, Stephen began, trying to piece everything together. That's not Licht, Secret interrupted. What? Stephen asked, taken aback. He may look like Licht, but that's not how Licht acts or behaves. Who you fought was merely an impersonator. If I had to guess, I'd say it was Patoli. From what I remember, he deeply admired Licht. It seems that Patoli was reincarnated into the captain of the Golden Dawn and is now collecting the magic stones to bring back the other elves, Secret explained. Wait, but there's still something I don't understand. How do I fit into all of this? You said this helped you remember where my name came from, Stephen said, still puzzled. Secret nodded. You see, His Majesty was very close with the leader of the elven clan, Licht. Because of that, he was privy to some of the elves' ancient history. According to legend, a strange and powerful wizard by the name of Agamotto created the elves. But that wasn't all. Agamotto also created a clan before leaving this world. A clan with the surname Strange. Chapter 75, Strange Dimensional Book. Third Person's POV. Do you remember anything else about the legend? Stephen asked, raising a skeptical eyebrow. His curiosity about his past was growing stronger with every word Secret uttered. Secret furrowed her brows in concentration, her crimson eyes narrowing as she tried to recall long-forgotten details. She murmured, her voice hesitant. It's been 500 years, so I'm definitely not going to remember everything, or even get it all right, for that matter. But I'm pretty sure the elves were once human. After some incident I can't recall exactly what happened, they were transformed into elves by Agamotto. And that's how the elves came to be. Secret paused for a moment as something else popped into her mind. Her eyes widened suddenly. Oh, that's right! She exclaimed, her voice full of realization. Stephen leaned back, giving her a strange look. What is it? The magic stones. Secret said excitedly, waving her hands as though the memory had just burst to the surface. They were designed after the stones Agamotto created. I remember His Majesty asking Licht about them once, and Licht explained that they were crafted to replicate what he called the elemental stones made by Agamotto himself. But they couldn't replicate them perfectly. The magic stones were made entirely of mana, not whatever element those stones were supposed to embody. Stephen's gaze sharpened as he reached up and carefully removed the eye of Agamotto from his chest. The green gem glinted faintly in the dim light. I think I can already guess what those stones were, he said quietly, turning the amulet in his fingers. Secret tilted her head slightly, her raven hair falling over one shoulder. Are you saying the stone in your amulet is one of them? Stephen nodded thoughtfully. And based on the name elemental stones, it seems obvious. They must represent the purest forms of elemental energy that's been given form. Secret's brow furrowed further. But wait, there are so many elements. Are you suggesting this Agamotto guy created a stone for every single one? Not necessarily, Stephen replied, his tone thoughtful as he analyzed the concept aloud. It could be limited to the 4 classical elements: earth, fire, water, air. Those are the foundations for most others, except for the more unique ones like time. If time exists as an element, then logically, so must space. Secret blinked, still confused. What makes the classical elements so special? Stephen smirked faintly, sensing an opportunity to explain. Take water, for instance. At its purest, most powerful form, you wouldn't just control the water itself. You could manipulate ice, blood, mist, or any liquid, even liquid metal, to some extent. The stone would embody the absolute essence of that element, granting unparalleled mastery. A flicker of understanding passed over Secret's face. Ah, so that's what you mean. But wait, she paused as another idea came to mind. She looked at him with a questioning expression. Can't we just ask the library? I mean, if this Agamotto was so important, there must be books about him here, right? Stephen blinked. I've never thought about doing that. He glanced upward, addressing the library directly. Mr. Library? Ma'am? Can you, give me a book about Agamotto? Please. Stephen tried again, his tone more pleading this time. Still, nothing happened. I guess this library only focuses on magic and magical artifacts, he muttered with a disappointed sigh. Just as he turned away, a soft hum resonated through the room, followed by a golden glow. A thick, ornate book descended slowly, landing in Stephen's outstretched hands. Its cover was a rich red, adorned with gold filigree and an intricate design of an eye in the center. Secret stepped closer, peering over his shoulder. The Path to Dimensions by Agamotto, she read aloud, her tone both curious and apprehensive. Stephen and Secret exchanged a glance before looking back at the book. Well, Secret said with a wry smile, I guess the library couldn't give you an autobiography, so it handed over the next best thing, a book written by him. Better than nothing, Stephen murmured as he opened the book. His eyes scanned the first page, and he began to read aloud. If you are of weak mind or will, then shut this book and put it back. Without hesitation, Stephen closed the book. All right. Message received, Mr. Agamotto. Thanks. Secret stared at him in disbelief. Seriously? What? Stephen asked defensively. That's an ominous warning. It's there for a reason. I'm just respecting it. Secret folded her arms, giving him a pointed look. Stephen sighed. Fine, fine. He opened the book again, this time carefully reading silently to ensure he didn't accidentally activate a spell. His track record with such things was far from spotless. Stephen then continued to read it out loud. Dimensional magic isn't for the weak mind and can be considered one of the most dangerous types of magic in existence. Although most dimensions are empty and are of free use, there are those that aren't, and if your mind and will is weak, you could be taken advantage of by the others of whose dimensions you take power from. These beings vary greatly, some are benevolent, others malicious, and a rare few are neutral. To master dimensional magic, one must not only fortify their mind and will but also understand the delicate balance between dimensions. Reckless use can cause rifts, portals to unstable planes that, if left unchecked, can unravel the very fabric of existence. He paused, his eyes narrowing. This feels less like a how-to guide and more like a don't-do-this manual. No one dimension is the same. Each is different, governed by its own set of laws and rules. The relationship between a sorcerer and a dimension is one of give and take. To draw power from a dimension, a sorcerer must offer something in return. This can range from simple energy exchanges to more complex pacts, depending on the nature of the dimension. Be warned, some dimensions demand more than others. Failure to uphold your side of the bargain may result in consequences beyond mortal comprehension. He flipped to the next page. Stephen read, dimensional sorcery requires not only precision but also discernment. Before invoking the power of a dimension, a sorcerer must first attune themselves to its frequency. This process is delicate and fraught with danger. Improper alignment can lead to catastrophic results. Catastrophic how? Secret asked sharply, leaning closer. Let's find out. Stephen scanned the next line. Misaligned attunement can result in dimensional bleed, where the rules and entities of one dimension spill into another. Such an event is nearly impossible to contain and often ends in annihilation or irreversible corruption of the affected dimensions. So I wrote this so you wouldn't do what I did. What he did? What did he do? Secret muttered curiously. Stephen shook his head as he still had no idea and kept reading. Those who successfully attune to a dimension gain access to its unique properties. However, this power comes at a cost. The more one draws from a dimension, the more one risks becoming tied to it. In extreme cases, sorcerers have been absorbed entirely, becoming nothing more than extensions of the dimension itself. Secret looked at Stephen warily, Do you think he was becoming stuck or absorbed by one of the dimensions and to leave behind a legacy he created, the strange clan or family, or whatever it's referred to? The possibility is there, Stephen muttered. Stephen then read the last page of the introduction. To those who dare tread this path, know this, the key to mastering dimensional sorcery lies not in power but in balance. Only those who respect the boundaries of what they wield may hope to survive. Stephen then flipped the page once more. He saw that the page was blank except for a sentence in the middle of it. Stephen, if you are reading this, good luck. Nope. Stephen shouted as he closed the book. Nuh-uh, I'm not reading this anymore, it was fun while it lasted. Chapter 76, Strange Creation. Third Person's POV. Secret glanced toward Stephen, her brow furrowed in concern. Stephen, how did he know you were going to open that book? And how could he possibly know what's happening inside your grimoire? Stephen sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Secret, you're asking questions I wish I had answers to. Honestly, this is unsettling. Every bit of it. His voice carried a weight of unease as he pulled out a chair at the table and sat down, placing the ancient book before him with deliberate care, as though it might spring to life at any moment. Without a word, Stephen reached for Secret, gently lifting her onto his lap. She didn't resist, sensing his need for comfort. He rested his chin lightly on her shoulder, his arms encircling her, seeking solace in her presence. Secret allowed the quiet intimacy, her delicate fingers tracing soothing patterns over his hand. Take your time, she murmured softly, her voice a gentle anchor amidst the storm of his thoughts. Stephen tightened his hold on her, drawing her closer until his face was buried against her neck. His breath warmed her skin, and his voice was a low rumble when he finally spoke. This could mean one of two things. Secret tilted her head slightly, giving him more room as his words tickled her neck, sending an involuntary shiver through her. Go on, she encouraged, her tone steady despite the growing tension. 1. Stephen began, I'm being manipulated. Someone, or something, is pulling the strings, forcing me to grow stronger for a reason I can't fathom. Maybe to free him, or worse to take over my body. His voice darkened at the thought, and Secret could feel his grip tighten around her waist. Or, she interjected thoughtfully as she came to the same conclusion as him, there's a potential danger. Agamotto foresaw a threat so great that it requires you to be strong enough to face it. Her voice was calm but carried a weight of understanding as she pieced together the same troubling possibilities. Stephen lifted his head slightly, meeting her gaze. Secret, what do you think I should do? His usual confidence faltered, leaving him vulnerable. She paused, her crimson eyes narrowing in thought. Normally, I'd say I don't know, this isn't a simple decision, there's a lot to take into account here. But there's one thing I'm certain of. She laced her fingers with his, her grip firm yet reassuring. Grow stronger. If this is manipulation, you'll need to surpass it, become so strong that you can break free. And if it's the other possibility, then you'll be ready for whatever danger lies ahead. Stephen studied her intently, absorbing her words. She gently removed his arms from around her and turned to face him fully, cupping his cheek in her hand. But remember this, she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. You're not alone. I'm here for you, always. And so are the Black Bulls. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. A faint smile curved Stephen's lips as he felt a surge of gratitude. You're right, he said, his voice steadier. I'm quite lucky to have you. Secret leaned forward, her smile soft and unwavering, and pressed a light kiss to his lips. I know I'm right. Now, let's see what this book has to offer. I'll leave you to it, though it seems you've made up your mind. As she moved to stand, Stephen caught her wrist, pulling her back with a playful grin. Stay. We can read it together. Two minds are better than one, after all. She settled back down with a small chuckle, and Stephen turned his attention to the book once more, flipping it open to the ominous page bearing his name. His voice filled the room as he read aloud. There are an infinite number of dimensions, Stephen read aloud, his voice steady. Some may even overlap with one another, existing in layers that are both separate and intertwined. Due to the danger these dimensions possess, I first crafted the orb, a crystal ball used to peer into these dimensions and determine if they were safe to explore. However, I realized the inconvenience of carrying the crystal ball everywhere. Thus, I later created the Eye, a more compact and versatile artifact, imbued with additional powers. On the page Stephen read were diagrams and images of both the Orb of Agamotto and the Eye of Agamotto. He flipped over to the next page, there are other dimensions which can be accessed from within, which are called the interdimensional planes. Take for example the dreamscape. The dreamscape is one of the entryways towards the dream dimension. The same way the mindscape is the entryway towards the astral plane. We must always remain, we ourselves are the keys to accessing extraordinary dimensions and other worlds. This is all actually very informative, Secret muttered. I wonder what other dimensions our bodies could possess, she said as she looked down at her own hands. They read on, absorbing the wealth of knowledge Agamotto had left behind. Page after page unraveled secrets of dimensional magic, each revelation more fascinating than the last. After a while Secret turned towards Stephen and looked at him warily. You know, reading all of this I'm now starting to understand just how amazing and powerful you truly are to have access to all of this power. Do you perhaps find me more attractive? Stephen asked with a sly smirk. Secret scoffed, I won't say attractive, but I do find you more admirable. Really? Stephen asked in amusement. Secret nodded, I can't imagine someone else having these powers and not practically getting drunk off of them. All of these power and you still remain you, that's something admirable. The grin on Stephen's face grew smug as he had his head held high upon hearing Secret's thought about him, which caused her to smile slightly and shake her head with an eye roll before they continued with their reading. Then, Stephen's voice faltered as they reached a chilling passage. Now that you know about what to do and what not to do when wielding dimensional magic, you won't turn into me. As I said in the beginning, dimensional magic is all about balance. Take more than what you are giving and the consequences will be dire. As I realized my misuse of dimensions magic, it was too late for me. It got to a point where the more of my dimensional magic I used, the worse I became. So to stop it from taking a hold on me completely and lessening my usage of dimensional magic, I created what is known as the elemental stones, the essences of magic itself: fire, water, wind and earth, darkness and light, along with the abstract elements of fate, spirit, time and space, order and chaos. And as I foresaw my fate, I realized I couldn't leave what I have created unguarded, thus I used all 12 stones and created a clan, a family to inherit my legacy. And due to their unnatural and rather strange creation, that's what they all came to be known as the strange clan that appeared out of nowhere. God damn it, what the hell is the matter with this dude? Stephen exclaimed. Chapter 77, Strange Dimension. Third Person's POV. Stephen's 24 hours in the library had expired, and with a reluctant sigh, he returned to his physical body. Stretching slightly to ease the stiffness, he straightened to his full height and rolled his shoulders. Nero, his avian companion, perched contentedly on his shoulder, a quiet observer to his movements. He then decided to open a portal to the mirror dimension. The world shifted around him as he entered the mirror dimension. The fractured, kaleidoscopic reflections of reality swirled in mesmerizing patterns. The training grounds he sought were just ahead, their geometric landscapes perfectly suited for his mystical exercises. Let's see which dimension we should borrow power from. Stephen murmured as he formed the Eye of Agamotto gesture over his chest. The intricate mechanism of his amulet clicked and shifted, revealing the gleaming golden eye. A slit materialized on his forehead, and a third eye opened, glowing faintly with golden energy. As its influence flowed through him, Stephen decided to take things a step further. Since I'm already using the eye, let's establish a telepathic link, he said, glancing at Nero. The bird tilted her head slightly, her voice echoing in his mind. Be careful. Stephen chuckled softly, reassuring her. Don't worry, Nero. Remember, the more I study and understand the mystic arts, the more powerful and refined my magic grows and becomes. Nero's deadpan voice carried a teasing edge. Yes, yes, I haven't forgotten your cheating powers. Stephen rolled his eyes. Anyway, as I was saying, I already have the knowledge and power to know what I'm doing. Hand signs and magic circles are like communication channels that let us connect with the universe and other dimensions. Incantations, on the other hand, are demands or permissions, ways to ask for their power. As he spoke, he wove a complex series of hand signs. Glowing runes began to appear, forming a vibrant orange magic circle before him. Its edges were adorned with ancient symbols, and at its center, an eye blinked to life. It was the symbol of his eye. Smaller circles materialized around his wrists and forearms, each humming with latent energy. With a deliberate swipe of his fingers, the image within the central circle flickered like a changing channel on a television. A fiery dimension appeared, its landscape ablaze with eternal flames. The inhabitants themselves seemed forged from fire. This is where my Fulton flames originate, Stephen said. He turned to Nero with a smile, swiping his fingers again. Who knows? Maybe in one of these dimensions, we'll find what we need to turn you back to normal. Not if it means undoing the spell on His Majesty. That's probably one way to return me to my human form, Nero said with a sigh. Wait, really? Stephen raised an eyebrow, stopping mid-motion and resting his hand on his chin. That would make sense. Damn, I almost want the elves' plan to succeed now. Nero stared at him with her usual fat bird face. What? If they succeed, they'll collect all the magic stones and summon the devil. Once he appears, you'd be forced to free the first wizard king, undoing your forbidden magic and returning to normal. It's a perfect plan. Nero shook her head. Just focus on what you're doing. All right, Stephen said. Just as he was about to continue, Nero leaned closer, rubbing herself against his cheek in silent appreciation for his promise. Stephen smiled faintly before swiping his fingers again, causing the magic circle's image to shift. The fiery landscape vanished, replaced by dimension after dimension, each unique and filled with untapped potential. One was a swirling tempest of cyclones beneath dark, roiling clouds. The dimension of Watum, Stephen murmured. Another revealed hordes of grotesque demons, their twisted forms writhing in the shadows. The demons of Dinak. Definitely worth studying later. He continued searching until he paused on a new vision, a realm of radiant skies lit by 7 blazing suns. The air shimmered with golden light that seemed to bathe both body and soul. This one is promising, Stephen said with a grin. Let's take a closer look. His eye of Agamotto revealed the dimension's nature. Forming the eye gesture again, Stephen pushed it toward the magic circle. A golden light burst from the eye and hit the circle, which shifted into a portal. Stephen stepped through, Nero on his shoulder. The sensation was indescribable, gentle and soothing, like a comforting embrace. Both Stephen and Nero instinctively closed their eyes, savoring the warmth that seemed to reach beyond the skin and touch their very souls. It feels incredible, Stephen murmured, spreading his arms slightly as if to absorb more of the radiance. A calm, melodic voice interrupted the moment. It does, doesn't it? Stephen opened his eyes, unshaken by the sudden presence. Before him stood 7 figures, each clad in flowing white ceremonial robes. Their faces were obscured by white veils marked with a red sun symbol. Despite the concealment, their posture exuded serenity and wisdom. Clasping his hands together, Stephen bowed respectfully. Forgive my intrusion. I am Dr. Stephen Strange, a sorcerer drawn here by the allure of your realm's energy. I hope I've not overstepped. The figures bowed in unison, their voices harmonious as one replied, Welcome, Stephen Strange. We are the 7 sons of Synopsis. Your presence here is no intrusion, all seekers of wisdom are welcome in this dimension. Another figure stepped forward, motioning toward the brilliant sky. You are in the dimension of Synopsis, where the 7 suns never set. This is a realm of peace and enlightenment, a sanctuary for those who wish to learn and grow. Stephen gazed upward, captivated by the 7 golden suns. The sky was a tapestry of light, painted with hues of gold and amber, and the clouds seemed to glow with an inner fire. You mentioned being a doctor, one of the suns said, their tone both curious and proud. You may find our realm particularly fascinating. The 7 suns you see above us produce a mystic light of wisdom, a light with unparalleled healing properties. Stephen's eyes gleamed with interest. A light that heals, truly remarkable. I would be honored to learn more about your realm and its gifts. Then let us guide you, the suns replied in unison, their robes fluttering as they gestured for Stephen to follow. The journey into the heart of the dimension of Synopsis had only just begun, promising revelations and insights. A few hours later, Stephen walked out from an orange portal, appearing back in his room. Stephen had a large smirk on his face as he muttered, How kind of them to actually teach me how to use their dimension's energy and power. Nero just had her usual look as she said, You know, the thing about you isn't your magic. It's not. Stephen questioned. Because of the spell he just learned, he wasn't so sure anymore. No, Nero said, it's the combination of your charisma and intellect. You have this way of showing your interest in learning that makes people just want to teach you, and at the speed of which you learn what you are taught is actually terrifying. Just tell me, how the hell do those guys already become great friends with you? We've only been there for 2 hours. Chapter 78, Strange Dilemma. Third person's POV. Stephen continued practicing his magic, striving to improve his mastery and exploring other dimensions. When he finally decided to end his session, he turned toward Nero and said, You know, he began, brushing some dust off his cloak, I think I might finally be able to cure you of your curse. The 7 Sons of Synopsis spell could do it. Nero asked, her typically deadpan eyes widening in surprise. If you've been paying attention during my studies, you'd know the 7 Sons of Synopsis is also a healing spell capable of expelling black magic from a person. And the magic you use is technically black magic, Stephen explained. I'm still worried, Nero said, her tone heavy. If dispersing the black magic from my body disrupts the spell keeping the Wizard King a statue, then what? And if I become human again and eventually pass away from old age, would the spell remain intact, or would the Wizard King be stuck as a statue forever, unable to find peace? Nero sighed, looking down. When she glanced back at Stephen, she noticed him pouting dramatically, his gaze turned away. Her head tilted in confusion. What? She asked, staring at him quizzically. It seems to me like you care more about the Wizard King than being with me, Stephen muttered, still sulking. Nero blinked, her bird-like eyes narrowing slightly. I'm not in love with the Wizard King, she said bluntly, her tone as flat as ever. I never said you were. Stephen shot back, his cheeks reddening slightly. But it's what you're thinking, Nero countered, rolling her eyes. She knew Stephen well enough by now to read his thoughts without needing magic. This is exactly why I was hesitant about starting anything serious with you. My duties, my responsibilities, they're deeply entwined with the Wizard King's fate. And while you might not like it, I can't just abandon that part of my life, and for that, I'm sorry. Stephen sighed, his irritation giving way to guilt. I know. There's no need to apologize, he said, his voice softening. You've carried this burden alone for 500 years. It'd be selfish of me to ask you to throw it all away for me. He scratched the back of his head, a sheepish expression crossing his face. Besides, I don't really have the right to get jealous, especially with my situation with Mimosa, which I still need to sort out. Nero's lips quirked into the faintest of smiles. I don't mind if you get jealous. In fact, I kind of like it, she admitted, her tone teasing but genuine. It shows you care. But I'm not saying I don't want to be with you, or that I don't want to be human again. I just need time to think this through. We can't rush something like this. The consequences are too great. The demon's presence is tied to Potoli and the others, so His Majesty must be freed soon but not recklessly. Stephen nodded solemnly. All right. We won't rush it. I was being impatient anyway, he said, sighing as he ruffled his hair in frustration. And I need to sort things out with Mimosa first. Leading her on isn't fair, and honestly, he trailed off, his shoulders slumping. I feel like such a scumbag. He gave Nero a deadpan look as she nodded in agreement. Are you serious? He asked flatly. Nero chuckled. I'm teasing you. You're not a scumbag, our relationship is just really complicated. Stephen sighed again, turning his gaze toward the ruined mirror dimension around him. With a flick of his fingers, he created a shimmering portal leading out. When he stepped through, he found himself in the training yard where Noelle and Wanda were sparring. Standing between them as they unleashed their attacks, Noelle's Sea Dragon's roar and Wanda's Hex Blast, Stephen calmly declared, I invoke the Shield of the Seraphim. Arcane Magic, Shield of the Seraphim. A glowing shield materialized in each of his hands, blocking the attacks and creating an explosion. Stephen! Both Noelle and Wanda shouted as smoke filled the air. When the smoke cleared, they saw Stephen unharmed, dispelling his shields with a flick of his wrists. Are you all right? Wanda asked, her voice laced with concern. You idiot! Why did you appear out of nowhere? Noelle snapped angrily. Yes, I'm fine, Stephen replied calmly. I was training in the mirror dimension. Anyway, he glanced around at the semi-destroyed training yard. I see you two are working hard. Wanda nodded. After our last encounter with the Eye of the Midnight Sun, we realized we need to become stronger. So we decided to train together, Noelle added. I see. Don't overwork yourselves, though, Stephen said as he began walking away. All that effort would be pointless if you hurt yourselves, especially since it hasn't been long since we got back. When Stephen entered the base, he found Vanessa lounging around. Feeling better? Vanessa asked, taking a swig from her bottle. Stephen raised an eyebrow. You looked upset earlier, Vanessa explained. I was wondering if something was bothering you. Stephen gave her a faint smile. I'm fine now, but thanks for worrying. He paused, then asked, by the way, has the captain or Asta returned? The captain's at a conference with the other Magic Knight captains, and Asta was summoned by the Wizard King to discuss his anti-magic, Vanessa replied. I see, Stephen muttered, however before he walked away Vanessa called out to him. Hey wait! Stephen hummed, turning back towards her. She waved her empty bottle in the air as she said, you have different and weird magic, do you perhaps have something to refill this up? She asked with a mischievous grin. Stephen rolled his eyes and snapped his fingers causing the bottle to be filled up to the top, while he walked away. Yes. Thanks babe. She called out raising her wine bottle as cheer. Stephen almost tripped and glared towards her with red ears, don't call me that. He he he. Vanessa only giggled as she liked to tease him and see him all embarrassed. Stephen snapped his fingers and as Vanessa went and took another swing she spat it back out, this is water. What are you trying to do? Make me sober. She only saw Stephen walk away and yelled, you're so petty. I'm sorry. Please just give me my wine back. She shouted pleadingly. Vanessa had puppy dog eyes as she looked towards Stephen as he continued walking and disappearing into the corridor. She looked at her glass bottle with water sadly, my wine she muttered with pouty sad lips before hearing the faint echoes of a snap and saw the blue clear liquid turned into a deep red. Yay, she cheered, pressing her face towards it. Chapter 79, Strange Offer. Third person's POV. Mimosa sat in front of her mirror, looking in confusion as Stephen appeared. That's strange, she began, her brow furrowing. Indeed, I am, Stephen interrupted with a smug nod, a playful grin tugging at his lips. Mimosa blinked before letting out a soft chuckle. She hadn't expected his quip. Rolling her eyes playfully, she said, I meant it's strange for you to call. We just met earlier today. Is something wrong? Stephen hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck, a clear sign he was nervous. I wanted to talk to you about something. Funny, so do I, Mimosa said with a warm smile, tilting her head slightly. Her golden hair cascaded over her shoulder as she leaned closer to the mirror. Would you mind if I go first? Not at all. Stephen's confusion was evident, but he gestured for her to continue. Go ahead. Mimosa straightened her posture, an excited glint lighting up her emerald eyes. What are your thoughts on having more than one wife? Stephen froze, his eyes widening as the words sank in. Hey? What did you just say? I don't think I heard you correctly. Even Nero, who was perched on Stephen's head, tilted her head in a comically puzzled manner, mirroring Stephen's bewilderment. Mimosa's smile deepened. You didn't hear me wrong. I want to know your thoughts on having more than one wife. Stephen tapped the glass of the mirror lightly, as if testing its integrity. I'm sorry, but there seems to be something wrong with my magic. I swear I'm not hearing you correctly. Rolling her eyes, Mimosa crossed her arms. If that's the case, then why don't you come to my room? It'll be easier to discuss this in person. Stephen sighed but nodded, his expression still caught between confusion and disbelief. All right, I'll be there in just a second. His image blurred, fading from the mirror, and moments later, the familiar hum of swirling magic filled the room. A glowing orange portal materialized behind her, casting warm light across her room's soft pastel tones. Mimosa turned just in time to see Stephen step through, the portal closing behind him with a faint shimmer. Yo! Stephen greeted casually, raising a hand in a half wave. He tilted his head, studying her intently. Okay, now run that question by me one more time. I'm not repeating myself, Mimosa said flatly, though her lips twitched with amusement. You heard me perfectly fine. Stephen scratched his head, his brow furrowed. Right. If I may ask, what brought on this question? Her smile turned enigmatic, though her eyes gleamed with seriousness. I asked my question first, she teased. Stephen shifted uncomfortably, running a hand through his dark hair. I've never really thought about it before. I mean, it's probably common for nobles in this world, but personally, I think it would be a lot of work. It's a big responsibility making sure no one feels neglected or less important. He paused. Mimosa smiled brightly, nodding her head. If he thinks that way then this will surely work out, she thought proudly. So, what was it that you wanted to say? Mimosa asked, looking up at him curiously, as she wanted to know what he had to say before delving back into her topic. Stephen hesitated but decided to be honest. He walked toward the bed, sat down, and patted the open space next to him, which Mimosa happily took. Where do I even begin? This is, Stephen muttered, looking away and scratching his head. Mimosa's smile slowly dwindled, turning wary as she saw him avoiding eye contact. There's someone else, isn't there? Stephen flinched slightly but sighed and nodded. Yes, however, the thing is, since I've gotten to know you, even though it's been a short while, I've come to care about you. I'm not as good a person as you think I am. I'm really selfish, and I don't want to choose. But I know I'll have to. Before Stephen could continue, Mimosa interrupted, still smiling slightly. Then don't choose. Stephen blinked, looking at her in confusion. What do you mean by that? Still smiling, Mimosa took a deep breath and continued, her voice soft yet determined. I've realized recently that I'm not the only one who cares about you. There are others women who depend on you, who need you. I don't want to be selfish and take you away from them, or keep you all to myself. One of them has already suffered so much, and I refuse to add to her pain. Stephen listened in stunned silence as Mimosa pressed on, her voice steady. The only solution I could come up with is for us to share you. But I didn't want to start something like this without your input. I know you don't like things being forced on you. Honestly, I'm really glad there's someone else and that you're having a hard time deciding, Mimosa explained. Stephen stared at her, mouth slightly agape, utterly unprepared for her response. Mimosa giggled, hiding her mouth behind her hand. So, who's the person? Have I met them before? Stephen nodded. Yes, I'm pretty sure you have, but you haven't been properly introduced. He reached to the top of his head, grabbed Nero and presented her to Mimosa. Mimosa looked down at Nero, who returned her gaze with her usual deadpan expression, lifting a wing in a salute. Mimosa blinked, then looked back at Stephen to see if he was joking. Finally, she said, Stephen, that's a bird. Stephen sighed, turning Nero toward himself. Sorry for this. He lifted 2 fingers and poked Nero's chest. Nero's astral form emerged, revealing her true human-like appearance. Mimosa's eyes nearly popped out of her head. A ghost! She exclaimed, pointing at Nero in alarm. That's her astral projection, Stephen explained. This is what Nero really looks like. I just pushed her soul out of her body. Mimosa looked at the sleeping bird, then at Nero, and back again. You can tell they're the same by their lifeless eyes, Stephen added. Nero gave him a deadpan look while floating in the air. Oh wow, you're right. They do look like they have no life behind them, Mimosa observed. Rude, Nero muttered. Sorry, Mimosa apologized. But wait, does that mean she's stuck as this anti-magic bird? Nero nodded. I've been stuck in that form for 500 years until Stephen found a way to separate my soul from my body. 500 years, you poor thing, Mimosa said, looking at Nero with pity before smiling. Stephen must be really important to you then, hey? Nero looked away in embarrassment. So, since you've heard about my harem plan, what do you think? Want to be a part of it? Mimosa asked with a smile. Stephen stared at her like she'd lost her mind for asking Nero such a question directly. Nero shrugged. Since I was a servant, I always thought I'd end up as someone's mistress. So, I don't really mind. Stephen exclaimed as he really wasn't expecting Secret's reply. Chapter 80, Strange Promise. Third person's POV. No, Mimosa said, shaking her head, a faint smile lingering in her lips. No. Nero asked, tilting her head in confusion. In order for this to work you can't be a mistress. None of us can, Mimosa said, lifting up a finger. What the hell is actually happening? Stephen wondered as he looked between Nero and Mimosa. Mimosa then turned towards Stephen. We actually never did get confirmation from you, did we? I was already planning everything without asking you what your decision on the matter was. Sorry about that, Mimosa apologized sincerely. Stephen made a hand sign causing time to stop all around. I panicked. Stephen sighed and realized what he truly did. He took a deep breath and thought this through. What the hell is going on with my life, man? When I reincarnated I was the happiest because I was finally away from those bastards. Never in a million years did I think I would be building a goddamn harem. Stephen rocked side to side in a contemplative manner. It's not just something I can say yes to without really thinking this through. Stephen rubbed his eye simply out of exasperation. After a bit Stephen returned the time back to normal. So what do you think? Mimosa inquired. Before I can say anything more I have to ask, are you sure you want to do this? I wouldn't want you to regret this later on in life, Stephen asked with a serious expression. Mimosa looked down with a faint smile. You might think of me as weak for saying this, but I really wouldn't want to hurt someone close to me. It's just something I refuse to do. Mimosa then looked up towards Stephen and looked him right his blue eyes and with a large radiant grin in her forest-colored eyes burning with determination as she said, with this no one will be hurt and we could all be happily together. Stephen stared wide-eyed looking at her wide smile as she closed her eyes and looked away from Mimosa. When Mimosa opened her eyes she tilted her head in confusion. She looked towards Nero and saw her smiling and motioned towards him with her head. Mimosa leaned towards the side and saw that Stephen was covering the bottom of his face with the back of his hand as he blushed. Why the hell did she look so beautiful? Ugh, I have to stop blushing, this so pathetic, Stephen said, making his ears red now out of embarrassment. Mimosa only had a teasing smirk which she suppressed. After Stephen calmed down, he took a deep breath and shook his head. I don't think you're weak, in fact I think you're the opposite, you're one of the most selfless people I know. It's one of the things I admire and like most about you. I still remember how during the dungeon raid you didn't hesitate to use your body as a shield to protect Noelle when she was injured when the dungeon was collapsing. When I saw that, that's when I wanted to get to know you more, wanted to know the person that was chosen as my fiancé. Mimosa looked down, smiling bashfully, until she saw Stephen reach his hand for hers. When she looked back up he was holding her hands with a serious expression. Although I'm agreeing to this plan, that doesn't mean you should be throwing away your own happiness and desires away just to please other people. Mimosa was taken aback, her eyes were suddenly widened, until she heard Stephen say, I want you to promise me something. I want you to promise me that if there ever comes a time where you have to choose to either be selfless or selfish, that you would pick to be selfish. There's absolutely nothing wrong with being selfish and choosing your own happiness, no matter what anyone tells you otherwise. Mimosa felt her heart skip a beat and butterflies flutter in her stomach as she looked at the intensity in Stephen's eyes. Mimosa looked down and began to chuckle. Stephen looked towards Nero, causing her to shrug as if asking, why are you asking me? They then heard her mumble something. Stephen looked back at her with a confused expression. Stephen hummed. I said you're a liar, she said with a small pout, although her eyes sparkled with joy. Wah! What did I lie about? Stephen asked as he doesn't really remember lying about anything. Earlier you said you weren't a good person, she said with a chuckle, but that's clearly a lie. No bad person ever admits that they're a bad person, and no bad person would ever make me promise them to choose my own happiness. Mimosa then went and tackled Stephen down the bed, taking him by surprise. She stood over him with her hands between Stephen's head as he laid in the bed. What are you doing? Stephen asked, looking up towards Mimosa with a raised brow, her beautiful long orange hair cascading down creating a veil around their faces. Mimosa looked down with a mischievous grin. I'm promising to be selfish and choosing my own happiness, she said before going down and locking lips with Stephen. Stephen was a bit taken aback before he closed his eyes and savored her honey flavor lips, his hand raised as he cupped her face as the two began to kiss. As they distanced themselves for a bit they both smiled and chuckled before they were immediately both attacked and pecked at by Nero, who had to repossess her body to save herself as they had accidentally thrown her sleeping body when Mimosa tackled Stephen. After a bit of apologizing, Nero was back in her astral form looking at them with a deadpan expression. Mimosa snapped her fingers as she realized, you know, we've never really introduced ourselves to one another, have we? And since we're planning to share Stephen and be together with him, then I think it would be better if we get to know each other and become friends, she said with a beautiful friendly smile. Mimosa extended her hand towards Secret. My name is Mimosa Vermilion, I hope we can get along well in the future. Secret Swallowtail, Secret said, hovering her hand over Mimosa's. Both shook their hands since they couldn't really touch each other due to her astral form. As they shook hands they couldn't help but laugh at how ridiculous they looked. Now that introductions are out of the way, let's get to know each other, Mimosa cheerfully. Stephen only looked at them with a smile and didn't interrupt them. Stephen was walking through the mirror dimension, with every step he took the entire space was shifting, moving around as if the entire dimension was taking them to their destination. On Stephen's head Nero's bird form rested while her eyes closed. Secret's astral form walking besides him with her hands behind her back. As she looked around at the ever-shifting plane she became curious. Why didn't you ask her? Ask her what? Stephen asked. Don't play dumb with me, I know you're smarter than you let on. Why didn't you ask Mimosa who it was that she was doing this for? For who the entire harem idea was for? We both know she wasn't talking about me, Secret scoffed. Stephen closed his eyes and let out a sigh. because it would be a redundant question to ask. I already know who she was referring to. No matter how much I try to pretend to be oblivious to it or act as if I don't know, hoping that she would get over it. Mimosa was obviously talking about Noelle.
Thanks for listening.